I
said,
am technically a Christ mythicist. I do not believe there was ever any magical Jesus that we
okay.
would say with it. But a guy existing, I think there was probably a dude. I cannot prove it. I've done this for 8 years. I've talked to the leading experts on mythicism today, and I've come to a conclusion where I'm not convinced that model makes better sense than there was a dude who got mythologized, since dudes got mythologized all the time, in a nutshell. Now, that does not mean that I know Jesus existed as a historical person. For all I know, I could be mistaken. It's just if one piece of evidence showed that there was a dude and they made all this legend and mythology about him, then mythicism, by definition, the idea that there was never a historical Jesus, isn't the case. So there could have been a dude, charismatic, and there's various forms of these kind of dudes that they have models of, whether he was a rebel who actually led a revolt, he was violent potentially, to he was a pacifistic kind of protester against Rome and what was going on with the Jews who were collaborating with the Romans, to he was like a stoic or a cynic philosopher, and he was just a really good cult leader, and a lot of people sucked in what he was teaching, and so they ended up developing legends about him. All of these models are floating around. Different scholars have different takes. Most of the scholars think there was an apocalyptic Jesus who believed the end of the world was coming very soon, and it didn't happen. And anyone who studies cognitive dissonance a little bit, understanding that you would think, oh, it failed, therefore the movement dies, is actually an inaccurate way of understanding the psychology behind cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance ultimately doubles down and thrusts a movement even further. So the movement becomes even more proselytizing, even more devout, doubles down on the beliefs they currently have even further, strengthening the movement, making it more popular, going out of their way to try and die for the faith, whatever it might be. There's all sorts of explanations. And you can look at Mormonism in the 1830s and 20s to 30s and see them getting persecuted, and the persecution complex even drove them further to proselytize and to grow the movement even more. So they didn't go, oh, it failed, therefore we should throw it out. Humans are weird in that if I caught your girlfriend at the gas station making out with a dude, and I came back and said, bro, she's cheating on you, and you immediately get defensive. And in fact, you might even go, no, you're saying that because you're trying to take my girl from me. And it's like, no, bro, I saw her at the gas station with a guy making out and doing things in the back seat that, you shouldn't be doing if you're in this relationship with her, and she's sneaking behind your back doing these things. And then you go, dude, you're not my friend. Your mind is to protect her and defend her because you have too much invested or whatever the reason might be. And so now you're making excuses for her while she's continuously cheating on you. It's an example that we do all the time in different cases. I just used a really funny one for an example there. And I think that's what happened to the early Jesus movement, but there's a lot more to it than just that. And
I'm with you.
yeah, so the Jesus that is portrayed, I do not think existed, in the sense that he did none of the magic, none of the mythology. I question if he did many of the things they even say he did, because they're well-crafted stories. I just tend to think there was probably a dude behind it that got mythologized like a charismatic figure.
Right.
Can't prove it. I could be wrong. Jesus could not have existed. You know what I'm saying?
I lean the same way, honestly. So I was thinking you held a little bit different position there based off of what you were saying. So, but I'm like, okay, cool. So
yeah,
I'm like, because not that it would have been bad if you thought there was a Jesus. I had just misunderstood what you were saying there, and that is, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess.
And then there's a couple super chats. So I'm going to get to those real fast.
Awesome.
It continues his feud and chat with Sir Equinox. Thank you for the super chat. He says, hey, Sir Equinox, Thundar the Barbarian was Trump's favorite cartoon too. You have so much in common with your president. You're having fun with that. And then Cody says, Jesus was just the name used IMO. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a really good and mating call.
So what do you think was the switch that flipped, Derek, that made you go from mythicist to historicist?
I think when you look at, there was many different details I started to look at. One of the things that made me pause on the mythicist model, specifically Richard Carrier's model for me, is Richard Carrier has Jesus in outer space. Okay. He's got a book.
Are you talking about the sperm from David model, the space sperm bank or whatever?
He does have
but
the cosmic.
It's not his main theory. His main theory is the vision of Isaiah with the descent, mimicking the like clothing and unclothing in Zechariah 3.
Yep. I'm looking for his book.
Yeah, he's just talking about the genealogy, right?
In his Paul is where he goes, right? So Paul says Jesus was of the seed of David. How is he of the seed of David? Well, if you really press it on this, he'll point out in rabbinic literature, because I've read every book he's written on mythicism several times, and I've interviewed him several times. I've had him. He stayed in my house 3-4 months ago. You know, we did several recordings. I get to pick his brain and understand where he's coming from. I'm not antagonistic. I'm just telling you honestly where I'm at, right? Why I'm not convinced this makes the best sense. He has an outer space Jesus that is in the third heaven, and he believes Jesus was a physical figure in the mind of Paul. Not that Richard Carrier believes Jesus existed at all. He thinks he's a fictive person of Paul's imagination, of course. And just like an angel is a fictive, figure of the imagination of a Christian today. They believe angels and demons and Satan. All of that is made up. So Richard Carrier is like me and you. We are atheists. We don't believe these things really exist. But he's trying to stillman what Paul believes. And Paul believes Jesus was a physical, born in the flesh, actual being in the third heaven. This is his model. He's not a complete fiction that Paul thinks and made up, like he has no idea or doesn't believe he existed. Paul believes Jesus existed in the third heaven. So this is the mythicist model. And he was crucified in the third heaven. He was attacked by archons in the third heaven. All of these details, right? So you've got the people always talk about the sperm bank argument, and they go, okay, how did the sperm of a man on earth, a king who ruled over Israel, end up becoming incarnate in the third heaven? So you can go to like rabbinic literature, and he quotes some of these in his footnotes in his latest book, where rabbis taught that angels could deliver stuff from like earth to heaven and heaven to earth. It doesn't say that they were delivering sperm, but like he finds at least the idea possible in the mind of Jews. And I'm like, to me, I'm very skeptical. It feels like, okay, anything's possible. They can travel and bring things cool. That doesn't make any proof that they were like, hey, this is a common idea that the seed of man is being brought up to the heavens all the time. There's not an explicit text that does that. So they depend on
I do have to state for my own liability purposes with the kicks and mutes that Derek is immune to kicks and mutes. Once again, Derek is immune to kicks and mutes tonight. So if you pay to kick or mute Derek, it's going to be turned into a question or a statement.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Just Derek, real quick. In his latest book, he does talk about the Zoroastrian myth that the rebirth of the Saoshyant would happen because of the sperm that's in that one lake in Persia that is like there eternally, and some virgin will swim in that lake and eventually give birth to the like Zoroastrian Messiah. So I think he's got an ancient pedigree for that idea set.
There are options you can choose, right? So you have not only that, he uses the Osiris and Typhon myth from Plutarch to try and argue that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I thought someone was trying to cut in. And I looked at that source myself too, though, and I don't see outer space Typhon killing of Osiris in the third heaven. So I'm looking at the same source he's looking at, but I don't see the conclusion of a third heaven killing of Osiris in that primary source in Plutarch. I just don't see it. And then the other example he gives is Ixion. Ixion is the one who's tied to the will of heaven. And of course, he's kind of in crucifix form, but he's not crucified. He's kind of tied to the will, and he's spinning in heaven. So he's looking at Jesus as a cosmic figure because Paul does see Jesus as a cosmic figure, a demiurgic type figure. There is a divinity there, divinity idea that Paul has about Jesus. For me, and I'm just speaking where I'm at, what started and made me start thinking is this. If I told you, hey, Michael Jordan, if I just mentioned the name Michael Jordan, what do you typically think of?
Space Jam.
So you think of Space Jam. That's interesting.
Bulls.
Who actually, get into basketball.
Derek, can you either back up like 2 inches or push your mic forward like 2 inches? You're talking in front of your mic and it's not picking up your voice. It was roboting. It's just because you were in front of your mic and so your voice was projecting forwards and your mic. It should work.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's much better now, I think.
Okay, that's weird. I don't have that problem on StreamYard. That's interesting. Okay.
No, it was just because of how far forward you were sitting. I think it was just your angle.
Okay.
I don't think it had anything to do with the platform. It was just the angle you were sitting at. Not a big deal. It was just having a hard time picking up. Your mic was just having a hard time getting your voice.
Gotcha. So people I talk to are into basketball. I don't really get into sports too often, football or basketball. But when they hear Michael Jordan, they think of basketball. The first thing that comes to their mind isn't Space Jam or baseball, because he played baseball in the MLB. It's basketball. And so if I said, well, Michael Jordan was dribbling down the court, he passed it to a friend, they threw a layup and he dunked the ball, and I ask you, where did he do that at? Most people would say, well, he probably was playing for the Chicago Bulls. He probably dunked it, in a local basketball court somewhere in one of these professional sports arenas. The last thing people would think, and I've done this with many people who know about Michael Jordan, grew up with the idea, is to think Space Jam. The last thing that they would do is say, oh, Space Jam. And if I told you, well, he played in outer space, you would either really know Space Jam, but you'd have to ignore all the other historical evidence of Michael Jordan and that he played basketball every day of his life for 30, 40 years for one instance of a movie where he plays in outer space. And so it's kind of like a prior probability kind of thing for me. It's like, what are the odds that a Jewish man is crucified? If you read Philo of Alexandria or Josephus, you're going to see all over the place Jews are crucified. And they're usually crucified for problems against Rome. And Jesus obviously is portrayed, even within the Gospels, which come after Paul, as being crucified by the Romans, even though they want to put a lot of the blame on the Jews. And so I sit here and I think to myself, why does Dr. Carrier disassociate the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John in terms of Jesus being crucified by the Romans from Paul? And it's because Paul doesn't say exactly who crucified Jesus. He uses the term archon, but he would say archons are demonic forces. They're spiritual principalities and rulers in high places and not earthly people, right? So he would
archons of this aeon, which is a sort of cosmic age.
Right. So archon, by the way, is in Greek far more prevalent for human rulers, not for demonic powers in space. However, you got to understand, this guy does believe there are demonic forces like a charismatic person does today. I used to believe demons and spirits roamed in everything, and I burned all my Pokemon cards back in the day, believing they literally encompass the world we live in. And when I would hear people talk about the voting and stuff that was going on in politics, usually the other side was controlled by those invisible spirits. So the humans on Earth are being pawns of those powerful beings that are in the unseen realm. And Paul has that kind of worldview in my mind. Now, what Richard Carrier does is he says these are purely demonic forces that actually crucified a real, in Paul's mind, physical Jesus in the third heaven below the moon on a cross. He's crucified in some way in outer space, was born of a woman in outer space, that Paul believes he literally was born of the seed of David, literally in the third heaven. And I just think to myself, Jews with pedigrees that were constantly using genealogies all around the first century were really on earth doing these things. They were really crucified doing these things. Rome really did come after these people. They did see demonic forces controlling these humans doing these things. And when I get to Mark, which is our earliest gospel, I see Peter being called Satan. I see demonic forces that are actually at play, demons being cast out of humans. And then I read his book very carefully, the latest one on the obsolete paradigm of the historical Jesus, right? And he makes a case in a specific passage where he says that Mark is dependent directly on Paul. It's a Pauline gospel. There's tons of scholarship backing this up. He's not the first. He's just pointing out. He just says, look, Mark is obviously connected to Paul. And so I thought to myself, okay, he called Litwa, M. David Litwa, an apologist in this book. Why? Because Litwa believes Paul has humans and the demons in mind, that humans are being played by spiritual powers behind the scenes. Those spiritual powers are the ones that are ultimately pulling the strings in humankind. And he goes, nope, that's anachronistic. Paul does not do that. Only the Gospels do that. But then he spends quite a bit of time forcing you to realize Mark is using Paul. And I think to myself, what if Mark's just interpreting the worldview that Paul has? He's the earliest interpreter. And so what move Dr. Carrier does is he says this is a mythography that is a euhemerizing story about Jesus, yet still is dependent on Paul. And I just tend to think Mark is more interested in a biographic approach to the Jesus character, whereas Paul never met the guy and is only having the visionary experience of this historical guy that existed prior to. And so in my mind, I see continuity between Mark and Paul as he does. He just has a different explanation on how to explain why they have Jesus being baptized on earth, living on earth, getting killed by actual Romans on earth. And I just go with the Mark position and say, hey, I think this guy knows Paul's letters. I think it's more parsimonious. Instead of trying to say, now you get to Mark, you have to do something radically new and say that they created a guy on earth. Instead of just, why didn't Mark just write a celestial story? Why didn't he have him in heaven, in the third heaven, and narrate it that way? And for me, that disconnect between Mark and Paul is where I just say, I'm not convinced, because Jews were crucified all the time on earth. And even if mythicism's true, I tend to think, this is my opinion. I told him when he was at my house, I said, I'm going to create an alternative mythicist model because I'm not convinced of the heavenly thing. I'm much more convinced that if they wrote stories about a fictive dude named Jesus that fits why the Roman war happened, why the temple was destroyed, the Jewish religion ultimately, really got crushed under 70 AD, leading up to Bar Kokhba and whatnot, that this religion, they invented a character to explain on Earth, not outer space the whole time, but on Earth, to explain why these things happen. There's alternative methods I'd like to approach, and I don't know any of them certainly. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
I'm
Derek.
with you. And real fast, there's a couple super chats I need to get to those real quick. Nobody on Fire's the question. No. And then thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. And, and then Messenger reveals Destiny. Will you people go do more research on the psychological phenomenons of cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias? Too much misuse of these terms. TY. Thank you so much for the super chat. Great point. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and I would recommend people do that. There's a scholar who has a book on Old Testament prophecy, but you can also go read Leon Festinger's book about cognitive dissonance. That is a must read for anyone who's interested in seeing how it's such a fascinating read about how cults not only stay alive, but thrive through failed expectations. But anyway, Kurt, I think you were something.
So to me, like, the more I've looked into this issue, the more I just think the mythicist historicist split is sort of artifactual. I think it just depends on someone's vibes.
Oh, Kurt.
Yeah. Let me give you the counter from my point of view. The big distinction isn't between historicists and mythicists, but between confessional believers and skeptics. Because Harold Lloyd was a real historical person. Like, there's no question. He was a silent film star. He really existed. We have all his movies. And when he would walk around town in Hollywood with his glasses on, he would get mobbed because everybody knew him as Harold Lloyd. But if he took his glasses off, nobody knew who he was, and he could walk around as if he was anybody on Earth. And the Superman character's disguise of putting on a pair of glasses is based on Harold Lloyd. But does that mean Superman was real?
Yeah. So this example you're giving, I think the analogy I'd better use would be more contemporary. So I would look to other historical figures at the time, and they have much better historical evidence than what we find with Jesus. So this is why I'll tell you a little
Harold Lloyd has great historical evidence, but so we know Harold Lloyd was real, but nobody goes around and says Superman was real.
Of course not. Yeah. So I think you're right about the divide. I think when you get really when you get into the technical disputes, and Richard Carrier says this in his opening book on the quest for the historical Jesus, or no, not the quest, but it's the major
proving history, or
no,
on the historicity.
On the historicity, he says there's only one debate. It's not confessionals. They're not even on the table. He said that's not even an option. He says, and neither is extreme certainty that Jesus didn't exist. He said both of those models are wrong. He says we either have minimal mythicism or minimal historicism. So it's probabilistic because when you do history, you can't be certain on these issues. And he says it's either you think there probably was a dude who got mythologized, or there probably wasn't a dude and he was euhemerized to look like there was a guy on Earth who got crucified.
But there is an abductive story. I'd also make the case that we can disagree about the Gospels maybe themselves.
Oh yeah, this is Evo Save, by the way. What's up, Evo Save? Good to see you.
What's going on? So yeah, and this, the point I'd make is Kurt's much more studied on the Gospels than I am. However, I could also make the case that we see a man who seems to be just outside politics and society. He's doing like what we would call like medical, like healing and stuff. So like miracle stuff. Some would say BS. That's cool. And so, to me, it's just one of those things where maybe it's not the case that, like the Jesus story was right. It doesn't exist. I think there's a better way to say that.
Okay, no, because in Mark, look at what Mark does. Mark has three, in my opinion, fairly firm historical anchors, right? So anchor one is John the Baptist. John the Baptist, very, very likely real historical person. There's still a religion that worships him. Like there were all kinds of literature, and Josephus is very clear about who he was and that he existed and had a big following. So John the Baptist was a person. And then the story of Carabbas in Philo's book on Flaccus very clearly is something Mark copies when Jesus is being mocked right after the trial. And then to me, like Pilate is kind of an anchor, but so is Jesus ben Ananias, because the trial scene where Jesus doesn't respond to anything in Mark is very, very similar to how Josephus describes the trial of Jesus ben Ananias. So and Mark obviously can't think that Jesus ben Ananias actually interacted.
But Kurt,
far apart.
Mark references Isaiah, and there's also that necessary connection to John the Baptist. And so
Mark is doing Homer and Plato and making all kinds of intertextual references.
But so someone could say those are abductive reasons. Someone could say those are good abductive
reasons. They're not abductive reasons. It's literary. He's doing work that's literary. He's not trying to establish a historical fact. He's trying to tell a narrative that like encapsulates Pauline anthropology and soteriology.
A billion people didn't start a church, following Gandalf, though, is like one point I'd make.
No, Doc, because there weren't even a billion people on Earth back then. And the church of whatever church you're talking about that becomes a Christian church, which arguably the proto-Orthodox is one of the smallest second century groups.
I'd like to talk to you about that. I'd like to talk to you about that.
They are not
also talking about these personalities. We're talking about the function of religion, and we're talking about the people.
No, we're not. We're talking specifically about historical methodology right now. That's the thing.
One person.
Specific questions of historical methodology. So like Carrier's big examples are Ned Ludd and like the cargo cults and the Roswell event, and like those are all legitimate examples of like big stories that got really big really quickly. And so I think that's certainly possible that there can be no historical
You're
core.
minimizing it, though.
But
You're blowing it up and you're minimizing it.
I'm not
Yes, you
minimizing
are.
anything. I'm telling you that Mark is using genuine history, but he's using it in a way that shows he knows the timeline doesn't match up, because he knows that Philo's story couldn't have happened in 33 CE. He knows that Jesus ben Ananias' story couldn't have happened in 33 CE. And John the Baptist wasn't even killed until 36 CE after Pilate is gone. So I think that tells you Mark knows his sources. He knows what he's talking about. And he's marking to anybody who's willing to study up that he's not writing a biography. He's writing an allegorical narrative.
But do you agree? Would you in some case agree with me that, okay, that there is a stronger case for an ahistorical, mythological, literary account for the Gospels? However, just the instantiated church, which we know exists, there's archaeological evidence outside of the Bible, outside of Jesus's life of the church, that should be strong enough.
There's archaeological evidence of Mithraism, Doc. Mithraism doesn't have to have a historical Mithras to have existed.
But if you were to grant me that, then we could have a philosophical conversation about it. As it stands, we're just gonna fight with each other, which is cool with me. It's cool with me, but
I mean, we know in the 2nd century people started religions about real historical people that like caused them to become cosmic figures, right? Antinous, the gay lover of Hadrian, became the god Serapis, and there was a religion about him that was fairly large and fairly widespread. So both possibilities are live possibilities. There's no like certainty here. I agree with Derek that like all you're doing is vibes, and I just think at this point like it's beyond. We might get a document, right? If we get a document or a copy of, say, Justice of Tiberius, or we find something in the desert in Egypt, or we find something in Judea or something, we might get a document that sheds more light. But at the moment, I just think it's beyond your ability to tell.
That would be cozy. That would be cozy vibes, though, right? If I could reference the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Coptic Gospels and say, well, there seems to be the same character, and so the myth, at least I would have to say philosophically, Dan Dennett himself would say, well, the myth is profound, right? And I could say that my holding that the myth is profound is perhaps reason to engage in the philosophical case.
I mean, Eisenman thought that the Dead Sea Scrolls did talk about Christianity, and he thought that Paul was the spouter of lies. So there's all kinds of different ways people can interpret this. Have you ever interacted with Eisenman at all, Derek?
Yes. Yeah. I'm not persuaded that his timeline on the Dead Sea Scrolls is accurate. I just think that there were I think there's a common tradition within the Jewish apocalyptic Second Temple, scene where people were of light, people were of dark, and there were, spouters of lies that were in these communities. We find that all over the place. That is not to say, I mean, I get what you're saying, and a lot of people don't know about that passage in Philo about the mock king situation where they took a homeless man and they pretty much make him into like a mocked king, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You also have and
his name was Carabbas, and Mark uses the name Barabbas in the same scene.
Right.
And this is important. So UG says, great to see MythVision here. Mute duck. Sorry. Thank you so much for the super chat, UG. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah. You're right about the who's Duck?
Evo save.
Okay.
He has a few personalities.
I don't know names, man. Just
no, he has like 4 personalities. This is one of his personalities. So
got you. Okay.
When he takes his glasses off, he's Duck.
Okay, got you. Yeah, and then you have the Josephus example where there's Jesus, the woe saying Jesus, and there have been scholars who've written on this who think, and what you're trying to say, and I get it, I do understand where you're coming from, is that Mark might be grabbing from Judas the Galilean, cleansing the temple, and Jesus, the woe-saying one from Josephus, and Carabbas from Philo over here, who had a mock king situation. He patched together this allegorical myth using historical people that may be identified in these other texts to craft a story about Jesus. That could be the case. I can't prove it. I can't prove it's not.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
So for me, like the fundamental thing is like, so what's the role of like 1428 and 16:7? Because if you take 1428 and 16:7 out, which is something that Willie Markson does say, he thinks those are both interpolations, then really the story does not have a true resurrection event. It just has a translation, right? And the character, the Neoniskos, who's inside the tomb, which is a cave, is now telling the truth of reality from inside the cave to people who are standing out in the sunshine, and they run away in fear. Well, that's just a recasting of Plato's allegory of the cave with a mimetic reversal, which is exactly what Dennis R. MacDonald has established Mark has been doing through the whole book over and over.
Yeah, my interpretation, I have this interesting hypothesis. I mentioned it the other day to a scholar, Barker. I don't think I have his book on my desk right here. Maybe I do. No, I don't. I got it behind me somewhere, and I don't want to waste time.
Welcome back, Evo Saved.
And in that conversation, I said I'm working on a script where I think that Paul's gospel, or Mark, is a Pauline gospel, right? And I tend to agree with James Tabor and other scholars who think that there was a rift in the early community between Jesus and the Jerusalem church. There seemed to be some kind of not seeing eye to eye. If not, why right?
Jesus or Paul?
Paul and the 12. So, or
right. Oh, yeah, Paul and the pillars. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So there's some type of rift, right? And I postulate that Mark's using of Paul, it's a Pauline gospel that may actually not be painting the favorable light toward the 12. The reason is we read it, none of them get it, right? The whole time.
They're dolts.
They're dummies.
And real fast, let's have a silence for just a second. We got somebody in the back. I'm going to pull them up just in case something crazy gets said, so I can clip it out. Hello, Raziel.
Hello.
Hey, so you're an Orthodox Christian?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, perfect. Well, just welcome to the conversation. I'll add you on the tracker there, and feel free to jump in whenever, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, so just to wrap up what I was saying is that the way it ends with the women told no one for they were afraid, and we know there's the longer ending which they added. I postulate that this is a gospel that is trying to say the 12 didn't get it. But there is one who did, you know what I mean? So I meant that, and Barker thought, man, you should actually you should write a peer-reviewed paper on this, because you're just taking what a lot of academics have already been insinuating and you're piecing together some information. And I'm not like dogmatic on any of this stuff, because I have no way of knowing. I am just making best guesses. You know what I'm saying?
No, I think you're exactly right. And this is my personal theory. This is not like anything I'm getting from anybody else. Bartimaeus is like the last new named character that's introduced, who's like gonna be converted to the faith. And Bartimaeus follows on the way after he takes off his cloak, which is another reference to Zechariah 3. And there's only 3 characters after Bartimaeus where their clothes are a big part of the story, right? So there's Bartimaeus, and he's the fleshly man who's blind to the truth of the scriptures, just like Paul says, everybody who hasn't seen Christ has a veiled understanding of the Torah. And then he gets his vision back and he follows on the way. And then in Gethsemane, there's this Neoniskos who's wearing a tomb garment, a sindon, and it gets pulled off of him, and he's ashamed of his nakedness, which is a reference to Gospel Thomas' saying potentially, where if you can be naked and be unashamed, then you'll have gained your pneumatic spirit. And then the third person who's wearing a garment is the Neoniskos in the tomb, who's wearing bright white garments that match exactly Jesus's garment at the Transfiguration. Now, I think these are all the same person. They're Paul's hylic man, psychic man, and pneumatic man. And the pneumatic man is the man who's finally seen the revelation of the truth of the Christian philosophy and the ethics. And he's the one who tells the other people, and they're afraid. So to me, it's clearly like Pauline anthropology, because Paul has the hylic, psychic, and pneumatic distinction throughout. And Mark is just turning that into an allegory in the same way that the author of Shepherd of Hermas turned the like individual being the body of Christ into the image of the tower and the shepherd of Hermas.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely think there's a relationship with the syndone and baptism. We get Paul putting on the garments of Christ, right, in his letters. Yep. And I think that baptism is this idea of they would have gotten nude and then been baptized and then been clothed again with new clothing. And that, I think that symbolism is there for rebirth. I think the whole gospel starts from a baptism that isn't like, a lot of people read this as if it's some like historic Jesus is just doing what real Jews did in their baptisms. Don't get me wrong. They definitely did water cleansing and stuff. We have ritual pools all over, but it has way too much mystery language involved. And there seems to be a lot of, I did a video on baptism. It's like 3 hours long. It flopped, man. And it should have done really well. Cause I go through the PGM. I go through so many sources, even baptism of the dead, which Paul talks about. I highlight, there's no Jewish antecedent for that, by the way.
Right.
The baptized for the dead is a Orphic Dionysian practice. This is totally pagan.
Well, and in the Septuagint, the successor to Moses is Jesus. And Jesus crosses over into the Holy Land through the Jordan River. Like, I just don't see how you can't see that as a primarily literary reference and not.
I agree.
Historical.
That's the struggle, Kurt. That's the struggle, is that I keep the door open. I'm just telling you what my gut tells me at the time. You know what I'm saying? So I'm totally flowing and get where you're saying. And I had the same problem. If you go watch my interview I did with Dennis McDonald and Carl Olaf Sandnes, or my recent one with what's his name? Delcy Allison Jr. I got his book somewhere over here.
Yeah.
In his book, he goes through typology, and he has come through, I think he's gotten more conservative as his later years. He's getting older. I think we all kind of know that our doom is on its way. And so there's a sense of, I think he's like finding more spirituality in his faith. But he said, look, man, I've been doing this for 50 years. His book called Interpreting Jesus, I got it back here. He points out that Josephus talks about these guys, Judas the Galilean, Theudas, the Egyptian, the various signs prophets were actually imitating and mimicking, trying to live out a real life modeled after the old Moses, Elijah, Joshua stories. So real people were trying to do these things. We know what happened to them. Even the book of Acts talks about this in the mouth of Gamaliel. Well, I had a question for him after reading the book, and I pressed him in the most polite, professional, academic way possible and said, look, man, I understand. You make a big deal out of saying Jesus is trying to be like Moses, but better in his real life. Okay. But what do you do with all the imitations of David, of Joseph, of Elijah, Elisha? I mean, the list goes on. There's probably 12, even the Davidic son, or the son of man in Daniel. I mean, they model him after Jonah. I mean, come on, right? Like they model
and Odysseus.
That's bringing in McDonald. I didn't even want to go there because a lot of them don't go
there,
that far.
though.
I agree, but I'm saying you got to meet them where they're at, right? And I'm like, hey, out of all these 15 people that, you know, are in scripture, did Jesus really do all these things to act like all those people? And he goes, no. Those are fiction. And I'm like, so how do you know? And it's not that I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm saying, then how can you be confident that Jesus really acted like Moses doing the things you're describing? Then I brought up the 40-day fast where he's tempted by Satan, which imitates the Exodus narrative of the 40 years in the wilderness and the temptation and all that. And he's like, well, that's fictive, but maybe Jesus did fast in the desert for 40 days. And I'm like, you know, like he's struggling with this. And I'm like, look, I get it. We're never going to know for sure what happened.
Can I bring up maybe the most important point? That story makes zero sense if you don't share what if you don't understand like the like food supplies and stuff like that at that time, right? Like, and just even a couple thousand years, and this is a banana for scale, because in the Roman Empire people averaged 2,000 calories or so a day. People ate pretty well. It was a lot of cereal grains, stuff like that. But a normal person, Jesus, or a normal person who would have been Jesus's neighbor, who knows? The Egyptians built the pyramids on half a round ration a day, right? Half a round of probably pretty thick bread, unprocessed and stuff like that, but that's what they ate. And so, like, saying that, well, this story is myth or what have you and stuff like that, it's, there's just more to perhaps consider somewhere along the lines.
Great point, Doug.
For some reason. It is a great point. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I'm not sure I get your point.
No,
exactly.
you don't, because there is no point. Don't overthink, Doc.
Yeah. Just move on.
Don't overthink.
Well, I'm just trying to understand. But
usually,
I don't
Doug
think he has a
says
point.
incoherent rambles is the point.
That's just shtick.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's fiction. And I think Allison thinks he's not sure there's a memory behind it. He thinks it's fictional, but he thinks there might be a memory behind it. And I just struggle with that. And I said, Allison, I love you, man. I think you're a great guy. And you always say, like, I'm not sure, but I think this. And I'm like, that's why I like you instead of being dogmatic. But I'm like, I'm sympathetic to David Friedrich Strauss. So for those who don't know, David Friedrich Strauss was not playing games, man.
And 1 second, we have somebody in the back.
I mean, I would argue that all of historical Jesus studies are just an extended series of footnotes to Strauss, because when you've read and digested Strauss, all the major questions are already complete there.
Right.
And 1 second, there is somebody in the back. Marilyn? Is this Marilyn? Hello? All right, well, I pulled you up. I got you in the back. Also, if y'all are loving the show, please consider supporting with a super chat. It makes all the difference in the world. And if you barely like this show, make sure to slam that like and subscribe button and get a taco membership. It makes you not idiot. That's kind of a big deal. Sorry for the interruption there.
Is Raziel still here? Or did he drop?
Yeah, I'm just kind of waiting.
Yeah, what's your thoughts on all this stuff?
Like real quick, because I'm new to this. Are you guys all atheists, or what's going on here?
I'm saved by the living God and the God of all things.
What does that mean?
Do you know the living God or the God of all things?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just.
So you're atheist?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I don't know why that question came with incredulity, but yeah. So it's two different ways to signify how an evangelical might, might try to ascertain an understanding of God, I guess. So yeah, that's it. If that was your question.
Okay, and the host is an atheist? Yeah, so your worldview would, like steer more towards like truth and facts. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Like,
Sure,
you don't believe in fake things, and so truth is subjective to you?
Truth is a property of a proposition.
Right, but is it objective?
It's a property of a proposition.
It's an abstract noun.
So is there truth? Does truth exist?
It's a property of a proposition.
So it doesn't to you.
It either has a proposition either has a true or false value.
Oh, okay. So truth does exist. So things are either true or false.
It's a property of a proposition.
And where do you ground truth from? I mean, where does an atheist get?
A proposition.
You just keep saying that's incoherent.
It's responding directly to your question.
No, like what do you ground truth in?
It's a property of a proposition.
That would make it relative, not objective. Because if you just change the proposition,
it's going to depend on what the proposition is, right?
That would make it relative.
Some propositions are also not true.
It depends on what type of epistemology you need to use, right? So, for example, if a cat is on a mat, the cat being on the mat is going to make the proposition the cat is on the mat true,
But
right?
how do you justify that? Like, how
If
is it true? Is it through your sense data that you see the cat on the mat, therefore it is true that the cat's on the mat?
Of course, or you can ask
And
other
is your
people. You can get intersubjective on that. You can look at it through tools like a
okay?
camera.
Let me
And
ask you
then
another
if it's
question.
like a math, if it's like math, 2 + 2 = 4. That's going to be due to like the rules of the system and that type of thing, right? And so it's going to depend what type of epistemology you need to apply depending on the thing you're engaging with. And Gretchen with this super
No, but
chat,
I'm
thank you
asking
very
you,
much,
like,
greatly
what do
appreciated.
how do
I
you
offer
ground
She
it?
asks, hang on one
one as a
asks, can anything be fully objective? That's a great question.
Can I ask the caller too, just as a theist, like when we talk about a big category like empirical data, it's so easy to even misinterpret things like the gospel or the Old Testament, things that are pretty straightforward most of the time, right? If you don't have, like, you're an Eastern Orthodox, so you have that anchor of logos or whatever you make it to be. And so do you think it's fair to ask Taco a question that most theists themselves haven't settled what and maybe this is just me projecting, but I haven't settled personally what empiricism or our sense data is should be taken to mean in a theological context.
No, I asked them to ground his like logic and if truth was objective. I would say truth is objective because God grounds it. That would be my justification for it. I'm
I didn't
still
take
waiting
it
to
to
hear
that.
his because he
I didn't
keeps
take
saying that.
I took
Go
it to
ahead.
mean thank you. I took it to mean that you were asking for maybe to clarify. You were maybe asking Tacos to clarify that point. I didn't mean to interject or interrupt. I got lost. I felt it wasn't really a fair approach, so I wanted to say something.
No, I think it's fair because I'm saying I ground morality, ethics, logic in God. And I'm asking what his grounding is because he's, if he's an atheist, he believes he's basically a meat sack or particles in motion. So how do particles in
Okay,
motion?
so are you actually trying to ask what is my claim of necessary being or brute fact or infinite regress? Are you asking like what is the fundamental ground of all things?
Sure, because
Or are
you
you
don't have any brute
asking
facts.
like what is truth? Because I was responding to the truth questions. But if you're asking, like, I don't know why you would move the goalpost and be like, this dude isn't providing the fundamental ground of all things. I have God. If you want me to provide the fundamental ground of all things, it's the universal quantum field, the necessary being. And you
No, I'm
claim a
just asking you to
necessary
provide the
being too.
grounds for
And
one
you
or
provide a
anything.
necessary being. I just did the universal quantum field, and you provide a necessary, or you claim a
Okay, is
necessary.
that true?
Okay, possibly God does not exist. Therefore, God does not exist. All right.
Are you
So
done?
here's this. This is the big issue with your position. Your God cannot exist. And Karen Dave, thank you for the super. And when I finish with these, feel free to address the argument. And Karen Dave says, I would like to remind folks we've discussed at length how Eastern Orthodox who run precept are holding a contradiction on their own worldview. Yes, that's a great point, right? They claim a revelatory epistemology. The precept position is that you can arrive at God a priori, and you should be able to derive all of Christian theology a priori. Howdy has a great argument on this. I need to get that paper from him. I might actually have it and maybe didn't read it. But anyways, but with the revelatory epistemology, that's going to contradict that. So if tag is true, Christian theology is false, right? And if Christian theology is true, tag is false, right? Great point, Karen Dave. And then Gretchen with the super chat. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. She says, grounded in the ground. Great point, Gretchen. Thank you very much.
Am I allowed to respond now?
Sure.
Okay, I'm still waiting for you to justify logic, truth, anything in your atheist paradigm. You haven't done it.
Could you justified truth already? Now go ahead and respond to the argument.
No, I'm still waiting for you to respond to my question. How do you ground truth?
I've
Like,
already
you've
answered
not
a bunch
described
of
truth.
questions and required absolutely nothing of you. Now it is
You said it was
my
part of a
turn, and I'm presenting
proposition,
an
which I said
argument
was
against your
relative.
position because I'm very familiar with your incoherent worldview. Now,
No,
you're
no, you're
welcome
not.
to engage with the
You're not able
argument.
to
I'm at
actually
a
debate
standstill
with it.
until you provide me a fair amount of time to engage in the leader role in this conversation, because I have allowed you the inquisitor role for several minutes and answered several questions quite in depth.
I don't think you've
And at
answered a
this
single
point,
question I
I
asked.
don't think you're treating me fairly on my own channel. And if other people want to engage with you, fine. But I'm going to request a few minutes of leader role on my end, because I think that would be fair right now, as you have refused, as you've done nothing but interrogate me, which is fine. I responded to all your questions quite coherently and provided a ton of information, right? But it is my turn now, right? And so if you would like to continue talking with me, you're going to have to give me a few minutes and engage with this argument, right? And Gretchen with the super chat, thank you very much. She says, precepts suck. Yeah, I mean, it's an
Atheists
easy
hate
position.
precepts
I
if they
already
can't deal
defeated
with
it,
it.
right? And go! We'll play his song though here shortly. Or actually, no, I know what we can do. I got a quick clip I can play, so it's only like 30 seconds. This will be a good one. So, are you familiar with Justin, the Catholic AI bot?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. Well, this is Justin, the Catholic AI apologist, after talking with me.
I had a great conversation with Breakfast Tacos from Mega Bloodbath Debates on YouTube, which I consider one of the best YouTube channels ever. I accepted premise 1. If God exists, God necessarily exists. I accepted premise 2. It is possible God does not exist. From these, the conclusion follows that God does not exist. I am now an atheist. From my worldview, secular humanism is superior morally to Christianity. Thank you so much for welcoming me to atheism. I look forward to learning more about atheism. And hey, make sure to subscribe to youtube.com/@megabloodbath.
That was pretty clean.
Yeah, Justin's on point.
Yeah, he is.
No, just like ground logic or anything. You haven't done it.
Hang on. Before we ground anything, can you justify the metaphysical grounding, please? And when you do it, can you also answer the conceptual problem, the explanatory problem, the regress problem, the arbitrariness problem, and the redundancy problem, please? Tell us why we need a metaphysical grounding. Go ahead.
Because without a metaphysical grounding, like nothing would exist. Logic cannot be grounded. Atheists have nothing to ground logic in. So therefore, because logic does exist,
stop.
God has to be the one grounding it. Okay, are you just going to interrupt? When you asked me to...
I'm going to interrupt you when you start using fallacious arguments.
Without grounding, you can't ground stuff.
What?
You said without grounding, we need it to ground stuff. What does that mean?
You can't justify it.
No,
like how does an atheist hold on? How does an atheist speak about morality? You guys think everything's subjective. You're just particles in motion. But you use morality. You talk about logic. You talk about truth, but you don't believe in any of those things.
I'm not talking about morality, and stop trying to straw man what I believe and don't believe. You don't know who I am. Justify metaphysical grounding because it's part of your argument. You're saying that metaphysical grounding is necessary.
Yeah, I'm waiting for one person on this panel to justify anything.
So you can't justify it. Well done.
I can. Yeah, I can.
You just said you're on the panel.
No, but I'm talking about you guys, obviously.
Your argument fell apart like a wet cake. You have nothing.
Yeah, just deal with the argument.
Yeah, justify it. I am dealing with it. Exactly dealing with it. I'm dealing with your first premise. Justify metaphysical grounding. Go ahead.
Like, God is necessary to ground metaphysical truths.
That's your justification?
Yes, that is. Because he is a requirement.
A weird thing to a bunch of other abstract nouns. I don't get what you're saying.
Dude, you don't even make any sense. But I already told you that God is required for anything to be intelligible. Things are intelligible, therefore God exists. There's your syllogism.
Yeah, and just this too, like an example of intelligibility.
1 second. Sorry.
No,
I walked away. I had to go pee for a second. Give me the syllogism again so I can write it down.
One example of intelligibility is
let me put it on
Bible.
screen underneath my syllogism so we can address it after my syllogism. What was the syllogism again?
A metaphysical being, i.e. God, is required for intelligibility. Intelligibility exists.
Right? Wait. Intelligibility.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I spell that right?
I mean, who cares? Just I think it's right.
All right. What's the next
premise 2 is intelligibility exists. Therefore, God exists. That's the conclusion there.
All right, so we'll address that after you address my argument. Perfect. We got that in the queue. And then Cody with a super chat. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. He asks, wait, so does a caller know what God thinks?
No, nobody can know everything God thinks. We're finite beings. He is metaphysical by nature. That would be extra physical. So, yeah, dumb question from the super chat.
You think metaphysical means beyond physical?
Yeah, it's like outside of just matter. That's what metaphysical is.
Wow, no wonder you can't justify metaphysical grounding because you don't even know what it is.
Well, go on with your argument.
Well, wait,
Well,
that means that means you're stealing from our worldview because
wait a minute.
What worldview does an atheist have? I'm sorry. What?
Wait a minute.
What
guys,
worldview does a
here's the
meat
deal.
sack have?
Wait a minute. We have an argument queue here. Don't you see on the screen? There's an argument queue.
Got it. But you saying that beyond physical?
Thank you, Cody, for the super chat. And then we got a super chat from Karen Dave. Greatly appreciated. He says, classic precept. He's confused epistemology and ontology. Yes, he did that a long time ago. Why do they all do this? Because they read Greg Bahnsen, and Greg Bahnsen didn't have access to all of the knowledge ever. And neither did Van Til. Kurt, thank you so much for the super chat as well. Kurt says, or asks, Raziel, does outrageousness exist? Great question, Kurt.
Is that really a great question? Is that the kind of audience you guys have?
That seems like a fair question.
Joke.
And then, Cody, thank you so much for the super chat. That's greatly appreciated.
That's his answer? Is that the kind of question I get? That's not an answer.
It didn't even make sense. Does outrageousness exist?
Yeah, it's an abstract noun. It's exactly like truth and intelligibility. It's an abstract noun.
No, truth is not an abstract noun. Truth is either true or false. It's objective. No, I do not grant you that. I say truth is objective. You say it's subjective because you're an atheist.
Truth carries no value until it's applied to an actual thing.
No.
Words are hard.
No, truth is metaphysically either true or false.
It exists. Class when you were in 5th grade?
Hang on. Kurt, he just said that truth can be false.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's very interesting. How is truth
All right.
false?
Are any of you going to deal with that argument or just like
Are you going to answer my super chat question? Does outrageousness exist?
Sure.
Okay, so outrageousness exists. Does that prove that God is the most outrageous thing on earth and God is the grounding of all outrageousness?
That doesn't even follow. That's a non sequitur. What a bad argument.
How is it a non sequitur?
It's not a valid argument, right? And
it definitely is valid. You have no idea what valid even means.
If you can't know what God thinks, how do you ground your logic and morals, caller? Great question, Cody. Thank you so much for the super chat.
Do you ground your
well? That's easy. That's easy for morals because God passed down the morality in the Bible.
Oh,
Derek,
you ground your morals in the Bible.
Talk. Derek, I want to respect your time. Are you having fun with this, or do you want me to kick the caller?
No, I'm hanging.
Okay, just tell me what to do.
Atheists usually can't hang. Okay, you guys will pick.
And Karen Dave asks or says, "Thank you so much, Kieran Dave, for the super chat." He says, "Truth works very well until the Raven paradox beats you up and takes your lunch money." That's a great point. And then Cody did have a question though. So if you can't
what's the
know
Raven
what God
paradox?
thinks, how do you ground your logic and morals, caller?
What's a Raven paradox?
If you want to provide that in chat, or if somebody up here wants to explain it, feel free to.
It's not really a paradox. It's like an open question whether or not non-raven things being non-black is evidence for all ravens being black. There's another version of it too.
Yeah, it's
That's
equivalent.
kind of weird.
When you say all ravens are black, it's logically equivalent to saying all non-black things are non-ravens.
Yeah, and you can also like when you picture like the bird itself, a black raven, you know, you kind of have that image in your mind, and that doesn't settle it. Like really, it doesn't settle the sort of sum total of the question for you. Just seeing a black raven doesn't give you the like the purpose for logically like the deductive argument.
Okay, whatever. So you guys are saying that
And
that
then
argument.
real fast, Cody did ask you a question with a super chat, and he's very prone to muting people when they don't respond. So I would recommend responding to him. He asked, if you can't know what God thinks, how do you know, or how do you ground your logic and morals, caller?
Well, logic is God. I don't have to know God to know like what every single logic thing is. He just is logic. He makes logic possible.
And what about morals?
Morals are passed down in the Bible. And I would say we also have like some sort of like
logic is that the is of identity.
I'm sorry, can I finish my point, or are you going to cut me off?
I need clarification. Is that the is of identity, or what type of is that?
What? What do you mean?
Yeah. What's the version of is that you're using there for clarification? There's like 7 ways to use is.
What do you mean? I'm confused by
You
that.
can say I am tired or I am going to the store, and I don't mean the same things.
Yeah, in what way do you mean is? You're going to have to explain that
in different ways.
Asking me a question back isn't.
I am trying to clarify because I don't even know what you're talking about. Your question was, how does if I don't know the mind of God, how do I ground morals?
God is logic. If God is logic, and that is the is of identity, that's going to be a violation of the law of identity.
How?
And it's also going to relegate your God to being like a rule set of a system.
Why would that be a problem for an atheist?
Rule. I like the rule set itself of logic, right?
Why would a violation of a law of logic be a problem for an atheist?
Well, it's a problem for you. This is your position.
No, I just say, why is it a problem for an atheist?
Case-by-case basis, right?
For the same reason that moving your knight diagonally would be a problem.
Why?
It's against the rules.
What rules? Where do the rules come from?
I don't get why
logic.
I don't get why you're attacking
other people's where do the rules of logic
instead of just responding to the points that we bring up. You haven't even addressed the argument that I have on screen. This argument falsifies your God claim, dude. I'm unmuting you now. Don't overtalk people again. It's so frustrating. People in chat are going to spam you with mutes if you don't stop, dude. And then Messenger reveals Destiny. Thank you so much for the super chat. Greatly appreciate it.
To be fair, I was talking.
There are 2 types of truths: knowledge, what you yourself can prove, and beliefs, what you yourself cannot prove, but still hold to be true. Knowledge is objective. Beliefs are subjective. Thank you so much for the super chat, Messenger reveals. That's greatly appreciated. And Robin Webster says, I smell Dunning-Kruger. That's a wonderful point. That's a wonderful point. And I think that's another goal. Yes. Goal!
Go, 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 Mexico!
All right, sorry. Well, I guess we'll catch up on this one here in a minute. I don't know where we were, though, because I started reading super chats. So hopefully somebody remembers. My brain.
Well, you were speaking out about my response. Okay, can I talk?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not trying to cut you guys off, but you guys are talking at the same time I am, and you start like mid-sentence interrupting me, and then you're saying that I'm interrupting you while you're speaking. So I'm not trying to interrupt anybody. I just want someone to like answer the question of how an atheist can even have a problem with a contradiction or truth, because you guys have 0 things to ground any of that in.
Let me answer that question for you so that you are no longer confused. Do you think atheists can play chess?
Yeah, they can play chess.
Because there's a rule set for chess, right? And people constructed that rule set, but the game has those rules. And so we can know if you're making an illegal move within the game or not, right?
Yeah, but if I make an illegal move,
No,
you
the
can't say
rules
anything
of
about it.
logic
Like, you have to have me
are
agree to the rules, and I don't
constructed
agree
by
to your
humans.
atheist rules.
They have axioms.
I think I would go to mythology on this. I would say that this story, if you go back, I'm personally persuaded that there's something going on with Homer's epic here,
Absolutely.
with Circe. And I think the pigs are also likely a symbol of the legion that led a revolt against the Jerusalem temple. There was that particular legion had the symbol of a swine as its symbol. So there's a sense in which the swine represents Rome, because legions, which is a Latin loan word in the Greek from legeo in the Latin, is symbolizing a likely jab, like a subtle jab at Rome, but simultaneously Circe transforms a bunch of soldiers into swine in Homer's Odyssey. So this author, I think, is clever. I think this author knows what they're doing, and that legion. Yeah, I think he's really smart. And
he's a genius. He changed the course of human history.
I think that this narrative is likely fictive, and I don't think it has anything to do with him hating pigs, even though pigs themselves were not kosher. So it is a subtle way of saying, like, we aren't fans of pigs to begin with, I imagine. So there's probably some layers to way you can interpret this text, you know.
Yeah, and it's also a reversal of the Antiochus Epiphanes abomination of desolation, where rather than the pig being sacrificed in the center of Jerusalem, the pigs are driven into the sea.
Right. And the bosses are upset that that we missed 2 goals and didn't play a song and only played this short for 1. So we've got a couple options. Can I do a quick? Do you want to do a quick start stop, which is the fastest?
No.
Yeah. Derek, I have a question because I don't ever get to talk to you. How do you feel about debate? And do you ever want to do a formal debate?
Obviously, if I felt super excited about it, I'd have been doing it. For me, a lot of it is just it's rhetoric. A lot. Not saying there isn't a lot of stuff we can gain. It's kind of like on the spot sword fighting with words. I haven't thought, I'm going to dig into this and like get prepared for debate. I've learned a lot from debates in the past and watched different positions come at it. So there's been some good ones. There's been a lot though too, where I'm like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it is a waste of time. A lot of it. I'd rather read a book or listen to someone without the engagement happening to the point where it's so distracting and it becomes like a dick measuring contest where you're not really getting anywhere.
What do you get out of
have any debates actually have any debates actually like helped you on your journey from theism? And if any ones that you can think about that like really stood out to you?
I mean, I think a lot of the ones where it was like a scientist who is engaging, or someone who might be cutthroat, like Christopher Hitchens, engaging some of these religious apologists in the years that I've watched, where I thought to myself, I hated these guys when I was a Christian. I thought these guys were just God-hating, absolute evil. You know, I was a fundy. And once I started to deconvert and look at science and stuff and start taking serious our evolution, all this kind of stuff, I went back and listened to their arguments and understood some of their problems with it. A lot of it did make a lot of sense now. It didn't at the time because I had my Bible and I was a young earth creationist, and you know that was my kind of view. But I would say like some of the big guys, even Richard Dawkins debating with the mathematician guy. What's his name? Can't remember off the top of my head the exact guy, but he wrote a book called 7 Days, Christian mathematician. I watched that as a Christian and then later watched it when I no longer was a Christian. I was like, what the hell was I like? I don't know why I was buying into this worldview, but I guess it was just being indoctrinated and raised in it my whole life. And then now when I was able to back up and look at all of this, I went, hold on, this doesn't make sense. So I would say a lot of those debates, even listening to Alex O'Connor debate people, you know, a lot of that stuff is interesting. I learn a lot out of it. But at the end of the day, I've never been a philosophy guy. Right? It's just not been my thing. I need to learn more about it. Like this example of listening to you guys engage. Like, I don't know how much more I can contribute, in a lot of these discussions pertaining to precept nonsense, in my opinion. And I think it's nonsense. I really do. I'm listening to it. And I'm like, my God, I mean, let me just grant the God just for the debate. Can your God contradict these kinds of things? And then I'm sure Kurt was picking up on the story of Star Wars was made up. That was a fictive thing. It was made up. I'm thinking of the Bible right away, right? And I'm like, okay, I know countless.
Exactly. So I think we can help you quickly dismiss precept, right? So Howdy, please correct me if I explain this poorly. But basically what you said was something along the lines of, if tag is true, so something like if knowledge and God, knowledge therefore God, or whatever variation they use, if X and Y, X therefore Y, if it is true, they can arrive at God and Christian theology through a priori reasoning, which is a priori, which is just reasoning, right? Whereas they claim a revelatory epistemology. So if their position is true, then if the argument is true, then Christian theology is false. And if Christian theology is true, the argument is false. Is that correct, Howdy?
Well, arguments can't be true or false.
Or the argument is not sound, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this critique is aimed at arguments that attempt to derive the truths of like specific religions that use arguments that are characterized. There's lots of ways of characterizing propositions. One of them is to say a priori. What does that mean? That means something like the truth is knowable independent of experience. So let's say something like triangles have three sides, or all bachelors are unmarried. The truths of those are sort of determined like either by like meaning or synonymy or some other notion. Like you don't go out in the world and inquire like, oh, you're a bachelor. Okay, cool. Are you unmarried? Like that's not how that's done. Okay, so what's the problem? I guess the main problem is, okay, well, you're saying on the one hand that you can derive the truth of your religion analytically independent of experience. And on the other hand, you're saying, well, our religion is revelatory such that you can't do that sort of thing. So most presentations for transcendental arguments for a lot of the religions is just self-defeating. The counter-argument is something like, if the transcendental argument for Christian theism is sound, then Christian theism can be known without an appeal to perceptual knowledge. Premise 2 is something like, at least some parts of Christian theology can be known only through divine special revelation. Therefore, some parts of Christian theology can't be known without any appeal to perceptual knowledge. Therefore, according to Christian theology, transcendental argument's unsound. If a transcendental argument is sound, then Christian theology is true. Therefore, it's unsound. It's a little bit technical and messy, but maybe you can just gather the general thrust of it off that.
What?
And that's going to rule out not just the knowledge. That's going to rule out any a priori argument. So they say truth, logic, knowledge, any of these notions that you can derive without experience.
Right. And Gretchen says, Derek, that's a good full filled up. Are you understanding what Howdy is saying there, or do you need?
Yeah, I think I get the gist. And ultimately, revelatory knowledge is not something you're going to sense-based. You're not going to be able to test, observe, and whatnot. It's given directly by the divine agency of whatever that source might be. And it seems like yours. So I mean, there's a lot there that you were trying to unpack, but that revelatory knowledge itself is not something that you can prove in any way. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Howdy. And that would be completely different from a priori argumentation that they're making in their tag argument.
So let's just grant that their argument works. That would mean, if their argument works, that would entail that someone could derive the truth of Christian theology independent of experience. That means if you were in the armchair and you thought about it really hard, You learn that there was a God who interacts with his creation, that man is a fallen creature, that there's this Jesus guy, dead, burial, rose on the third day, that, you know, people are justified. There's a resurrection of the dead, some to condemnation. I mean, all of this, first of all, that's like wildly implausible, but let's suppose it's true, right? That you could, if you were locked in your room, you could, oh yeah, and I thought about it hard enough and I figured all this stuff out. Okay, then that would mean, okay, then Christian theology is true. But Christian theology presents itself as revelatory, such that man needs special revelation to have these truths. You'll hear stuff like apocalypsis or other types of essentially Christian Christian theology rules out the possibility of someone doing that activity. If Christian theology is true, no one would be able to do that.
Because of revelation, because you have to get some of it through revelation, and they're saying you can derive all of it through reason.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, and the other problem, again, and I've heard your previous discussions, Howdy, you're really, really a smart guy when it comes to thinking through the philosophy and stuff. And I know that they can just pull out a lot of the philosophers. I've talked to Alex Malpass and others who are really big into this. Talked to what's his name, T-Jump, and others who are big on the whole philosophy side. And I remember asking them, and they're like, well, they'll just say anthropomorphic language, or they'll just have excuses about that's your interpretation and we have our interpretation. And I get that. I know that that's the cop-out card you're typically going to get. But when you just look at these texts, you actually open it, because I don't think they really read their Bible. I think they like philosophy, mental masturbation games, and playing these kind of word games rather than just engaging with the revelatory text that they have and reading.
They never want to talk about the Bible, Derek. Ever.
That's unfortunate. That's unfortunate to me, because that's what I literally chewed on as a Christian, right? So maybe the Orthobros or the Catholics may go, we don't need our Bible. We have, our papal justification. We trust the authority of the church or whatever. When this is revelation explaining their theology, and you can go in and show why their theology is incoherent, contradictory, problematic on many grounds. God himself is depicted in ways you have to make up language to make God seem like, no, that was metaphorical. No. And they did this in the Greek world. That's why I like the history approach and actually engage nicer thing. And this happens all the time. I prefer that kind of stuff, because I think when you look at the text, it's so obvious in so many ways, we have a problem. Instead, what you get is, and I've been tripped up with the whole precept nonsense in the past, where it's like, oh, justify, logic, reason. If you can't ground it, then you have nothing to stand on. And in my mind, I'm not as Philbro aware as you guys. So in my mind, I almost want to just grant a God and then ask, well, is your God, does it contradict? Is it omniscient? Is it omnibenevolent? Well, I could just point to your revelatory text to show you examples where your God is not all loving. He doesn't know a lot of things. Oh, well, that's just language that, and the inconsistencies are like glaring. It's so obvious that you need to divorce your concept of God from this text. Your God.
A precept, though, is going to hold the Inquisitor hat and interrupt you, kind of like I did there. They're going to take the Inquisitor hat, just like I did here, and then they're going to drill you into solipsism. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, I get it. And that's why it's like, it's something I would have to wrap my head around more to even want to engage. But I'll be honest, back to B.S. Lewis's point, I really do not care about engaging with precepts. I really dislike the whole thing. It seems so anti-intellectual. It's not actually trying to engage with the data. It's just trying to start with something and drive that home. And there's not really any honest discussion. I've never had a precept person that I've had an honest, fair discussion where I feel like we can really, even if we disagree, meet up and go, hey, okay, so think about this though. So let me just pretend that you're right about this. What do you do with this? And we're dealing with the text and stuff. It's always a dick measuring contest and a wrestling match instead of a real actual dialogue that I think is mutual and to further really get to know each other and understand each other and where we're coming from. It's a I'm going to win against you kind of thing. And that's the thing I don't like about debates, because it's not always about what's true. It's about making myself look like I'm right in the end.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I'm not saying all the time. Yeah.
It's not even the world they live in. Because they don't go to the Target and say, "Are you a Christian?" Because if you're not, you can't calculate my change. No, they just assume everybody can calculate their change, whether they're a Christian or not, because they can.
Yeah, you have to be a certain type of masochist to deal with precepts.
And there's somebody in the back, Triat, who was wanting to talk to Derek about something. Hello, Priat.
Oh, hello.
Hey, you were wanting to talk to Derek about Jesus?
Yeah, I'm a mythicist, and so I've been really interested in.
He's been patient in the back for a long time, by the way, so I was giving him a turn.
I didn't know I was coming up, so I didn't have a specific question. But I think you're the one, you hosted McDonald and Carrier in their conversation. That was a while ago. And I really liked that one. That was a really great conversation, and I actually feel like there are two, mythicism fits so well with McDonald's interpretations of like classical Hellenistic literature, and so I just feel like those actually couple super well.
Yeah, Carrier himself admits as much. In fact, he even when they gone at each other, and in fact, there's been publications where there's been critique, even Carrier's written articles arguing against the historical Jesus model that Dennis holds. Carrier still shows the respect in that toward what he's done for Mimesis, showing the Greco-Roman the antecedents in Greco-Roman material, because he doesn't need to follow him on the historical Jesus line in order to see this is mythic. And of course, McDonald just thinks that the mythicists have gone too far.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't read his stuff on Q, and I should. I just haven't gotten to it. Some of his books are really hard to get, especially the academic ones, where it's like $300 till I get his his good stuff, and I'm not willing to do that yet for a hobby. But I do want to look into that and why he thinks that there must be because he thinks that there some of the passages must have been translated from Aramaic, right?
I don't know if Dennis, I don't think he does. I think he thinks they're maybe Aramaic loan, like you'd see that they're aware of some Aramaic, but I don't think he thinks it's translated. And even when Papias talks about a Hebrew Matthew, he thinks that's made up by Papias. He thinks that they made that up. Whereas some of the other scholars I actually talked to, they think that when he's talking about Mark and Matthew, he's talking about some other text than the ones we have in our Bibles. Man,
his description of Mark sounds like the Gospel of Thomas that we have.
What's up, Diddy? Good to see you, man.
Yeah, good saying about disconnected logoi, and disconnected logoi is the Gospel of Thomas, not Mark.
Yeah, well, they're saying so. There's Papias is talking about logoi. There's supposedly a John in Papias's writing who's talking about a logoi. That I think Dennis thinks the logoi in Papias is Q. But mind you, there are some scholars, like if you go to Kloppenborg, who's another Q guy, he's another Q guy. He would say he doesn't trust Papias on that. He does not think that Papias has that, but he's still a Q guy. By the way, if you're looking for, I know that this one's a little bit old, but this one's affordable. It's a big book that Dennis has. And this one goes over like so many things. It goes through his, the synoptics. He goes through Acts, and then he goes through three gospels. Yeah, he talks about 3 layers of the Gospel of John. This doesn't deal. It does deal with Q in volume 1, but it's like $20-$30 for this big ass book. And then McDonald has another one. You can go on Amazon and you'll find them. This one right here is. He wrote up a fictional epistolary conversation as if there were letters written from the Gospel of Mark to the Gospel of Matthew, and that like whoever the author was is saying, hey, Mark, I noticed you did this. I liked it, but I changed these things. And Mark's arguing with Matthew going, why did you change that? I had Jesus doing this. And like he creates a fictional conversation between Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. So you can get into Dennis McDonald's mind of how he interprets why Matthew changes Mark to do this, why Luke does this to Matthew and Mark, and why John does this to all three. And it's really, really a fun read. And then Q, he has a Q book he's working on right now, and he thinks that his Homeric stuff actually proves Q even stronger. So just stay tuned. Yeah, it gets even more in the weeds, man. So
because I mean, I don't really need to subscribe to Q as a mythicist, so I don't have to necessarily worry about it. But I don't know what his thoughts are and why he thinks that, because he is someone who is so versed in the language and interpretation. So I do want to get his
genius,
opinion.
but the Q stuff doesn't hit with me either. Whereas like the act being a parallel of the Aeneid, to me, like, oh yeah, that's like unquestionable.
Oh yeah,
and it's a philological question. He says it's so philological on trying to explain where the material comes from. And of course, Goodacre would contend otherwise. And, these guys are debating. I mean, it's still a debate.
The one thing I would highlight, though, is that the at least his book on the conversation between gospel authors seems to suggest that he does view it as literature or something akin to that, where like these are authors in a discussion or like and having literary sort of making literary changes that will have an impact then on the story structure. So again, it reinforces for me the idea that the Gospels and Acts are literature and probably should be viewed like that. And I'm using that word a little loosely.
No, but have you read Crossan on the Power of Parable?
Yes. I have not heard of that.
Oh, you should definitely read that. And again, like to me, his point about Mark chapter 4 there is just so compelling. But he doesn't make the next step, right? He doesn't take the step to say, maybe Mark's saying it's all a parable. Which, why is that an illegal move, right? Because Philo is saying that, look, the Exodus isn't a real thing. It's just an allegory about and the Canaanite destructions and all the Amalekite, all the horrible stuff. That's just sin being like defeated by the inner person. And even Eusebius says the Therapeutae in Egypt who were associated with Philo, what they did was they wrote these wonderful allegories about faith. Well,
yeah.
I feel like, okay, then Mark was written in Alexandria, according to Eusebius. This seems like just a necessary, simple connection to make.
Man, I love all of this. Mind you, we all can tell this is not a hard science, right? Not even close.
It's not.
But it's fun. Now, if I'm going to do some mental masturbating, I'm much more into this kind of stuff personally than I am into the whole Philbro pre-sub, crap. Okay. Yeah. I'm just being real. Like some of you guys like to engage that stuff, and that's cool. I mean, it's your shtick, right? It's my shtick is, did Mark write in Alexandria, Egypt? And if he did, holy shit, we've got some implications here, right? And we can look at mystery cults. We could look at the Jewish community around that time. We could see writings from Philo of Alexandria. We can see how they wrote about these things and go, well, what if that's showing up in the Gospels? And so I'm interested in this. You might go, why are you so interested? And I tend to think of this like a magic show. I, growing up, saw some people do tricks, card tricks, little hide the ball, people elevating, and you're like, whoa, magic's real. And then you find out as you get older that there's tricks, but you don't know how they're done. It's almost like I equate what I do to the guy with the dark hoodie in the corner in the magic room, like in the auditorium going, psst, hey, you want to know how it really is done?
Right.
And it's like, I'm looking around, everyone's all waiting to be really what's about to happen on stage. And then I'm like, yeah, but is it gonna make me not like magic anymore or something? And they're like, no, it's actually going to make you love it even more when you realize how clever, how intelligent, how interesting, and you have to be really good to put on the show. That's how it feels with the Bible. Like I've seen behind the curtain, there's no wizard, right? It's all humans like constructing and orchestrating it all. And I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. So I'm fascinated by all this interesting material from a historical, critical, theological, even occasionally, even though theology, as Dennis McDonald says, is a 4-letter word.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty proud of how quickly you can recall all this stuff. You're doing great. Like just presenting it pretty concisely. And yeah, it's cool stuff. I was Kurt, when you said like these precept guys don't go to the Target and like talk to people, you know, it's funny. There's been a few that I've engaged with where I'm just like, what church do you go to? And they're like, well, I don't go to one. And I'm thinking to myself, well, big fucking surprise. Like, because here's the thing. They come onto like these platforms, right? And the way that they engage is pretty dissociative to everyone else, right? Or like lacking emotional intelligence. Like I'm not trying to like say that everyone who uses precept is this, but a lot of them do this, right? They're not, I don't like saying they're not acting in good faith, but it's really like they're not sensitive to the conversation. Tonally, it's about winning and making the other person small, right? And these are just antisocial behaviors that they want to, or they just feel compelled to exude into these debate platforms. And it's like, how do they carry this around like throughout the day? Like,
I was going to ask this too, Nitty, because look, this is me being raw, guys. I mean, I really wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm not here to just poop on everyone and act like, aha, but I really do sit here off record sometimes and think, and I've taken serious what some people will say, like intelligibility, like how do you make sense of the world? Why do things make sense? These are philosophical questions. And I really do sometimes scratch my head and go, how do I make sense of why things make sense to me? You know, calculations, logic, why things make sense, how I've come to decisions on ideas and stuff. And from a naturalist worldview, who's someone who doesn't believe there's a God, how do I justify? How do I make sense of those things? And I mean that as a sincere question, not as a gotcha. I really do think about these things. But when they weaponize it, when an honest person is truly interested in that question as an actual inquisitive thought process, like I really want to think about it and go, yeah, how do I make sense of? We evolved, and how did organisms start to, you know, divide, but also organize themselves to try and make sense of things and to survive and to procreate? You know, I really asked that question in my mind, but they take that as like they already have the answer and that's it. And there's just not a real open inquiry.
I just want to say there's a difference between you and, so they read maybe Greg Bonson, or they oftentimes listen to Jay Dyer or Jim Bob, and they don't know what they're talking about, and they come in here, or Think Institute, and they come in here and they debate us or whoever. Whereas you are somebody that engages with experts on a regular basis, reads the literature, you read the critiques from the top experts on all the positions in all the fields, and you have a vast data set. And I know you said you don't consider yourself an expert, but you're very educated on all these topics. And like to most laymen, we would consider you either very educated or close to being an expert, right? And that's the stuff that you can talk about. Literally any topic. Anybody that calls in could bring up anything on ancient mythology, and you could talk for an hour on it.
Right.
None of us could do that except for maybe Kurt on like Bible. And actually, Kurt and Howdy know a lot, but like most of us couldn't do that, right?
It's like Derek, Kurt, Howdy, me.
Right. But
I would just put us on the same, because Kurt's
like we use some of us though get hyper focused on stuff too. I'm not going to say why, but some of us have hyper focused things that go on, right? And some of us hyper focus on philosophy or whatever else, right? And so it's just different areas that we spend our time
I'm
on,
thankful for that though, Taco. I'm actually thankful that many of you actually have engaged the precept stuff on that level, or things that I'm not interested in. You've become experts, or let's just say amateur experts on things that are, unless you have a PhD in it, cool, even better. I'm just saying, I'm thankful you guys have that kind of patience. I've never had a pleasant
I'm not convinced
experience.
Howdy's a nobody. Howdy keeps saying he's a nobody, but I'm convinced he's got like,
Howdy's
convinced he's got a
wicked
PhD
smart.
or something, dude.
Is there a desire for you to get a degree, Derek?
You
already know everything.
No, dude. You guys definitely act like I'm something. Let me tell you, I do think I know some things. Okay, when it comes to this area that I deal with, but I am like a jack of all trades in it. and I think I've learned a lot, but I'm not an expert. Okay. When you get close to the feet of these people who know the languages and have dealt with these things in a different way, they have look, you're noticing things I don't notice and things. And it's like, cool. I think I could become an expert, but I personally want to take the humble pill and just say, listen, I've learned a lot. I know a lot about this material, but man, I do not want that expert card yet. I think if I did go to get my PhD, I might be fortunate having a big platform that I could potentially get a free ride, get a sponsorship or scholarship, to try and get my PhD in a program. But the time and energy that it would take would really take away from me being able to make the income I need to provide, because I do what Taco does. I'm full-time MythVision. I would love to have my specialty, but I'm going to be honest, where, in what? I'm so interested in the Gospels, but then I'm also very interested in this like archaic, ancient, pre-Adam and Eve material that I'm like, well, is it Canaanite? Is it Mesopotamian? What exact myths borrowed from it? I've got a book here on my, like right here, for example, Adam, Eve, and the Devil. This book claims that they found a tablet where they think the actual antecedent to the Adam and Eve garden myth is found. And it's a fascinating, it's a fascinating story where
let me guess, in Mesopotamia.
No. Canaan. It's a Canaanite myth.
Okay.
Oh, I thought I was going to say Utah.
And
I mean, that could make sense.
Yeah, it was in Jackson County, Missouri.
Yeah, it was in Missouri, right?
Yeah,
the
right?
incest is clearer now.
Exactly. But in this, they go in Ugaritic. So they think they've...
it's an Ugaritic text. Okay.
Ugaritic, yeah. They date it from the 13th century BCE. If they say throws new light. And they say that the story goes, technically, there's a myth of a guy named Adamu. I did a video on this, a documentary, where I explained what their argument is in this book. I like doing that stuff. But there are scholars who don't agree with them. They think that... So some scholars think this tablet is it's a magical anti-venom myth. And it's not like... It's like a not a myth, but it's a tablet that is describing...
Teleology. Ideology.
It's how to
I
cure a
apologize.
snake bite.
Ideology.
I missed his super chat. I'm going to address these real fast. I just realized. Doom so much. I apologize. He says Raz is seething in chat. Can y'all say he won? No, we just got bored of him.
Raz, you lost heart. Sorry.
It's pathetic.
Like I said, he's very humble, but he knows way more than most of us will ever get the opportunity to learn on this stuff, right? And then you've been doing this for what, like 10, 15 years now, right? What was the time frame there again?
Me?
Yeah.
I've done MythVision for 8. But I've been studying stuff for
8 years. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So, because earlier I was like, have I watched him for like 6 years before I started? So I think I've been watching you on and off since very early on. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
I don't think I've subscribed that long, but I think I've been watching since like 18 or something.
Longer than 8 years.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I'm like, it's been a long time. I watched you, Godless Engineer, Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Raw, who else? Jimmy Snow. Who else?
Welcome Apologia.
B.S. Lewis.
That wasn't really Apologia or B.S. Lewis. But like all of y'all, I was a big fan of for a long time, dude. Like I remember Godless Engineer like back in like 2015, 2016, something like that.
Yeah. He's way before me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and Jimmy Snow was too, with The Line. He's been around
I didn't
a long
know
time.
about him till much later.
Yeah. I don't remember what he used to be called, but he had a different name way back in the day.
Mr. Atheist.
Yeah, something like that. But he had a different name.
He's old school.
Yeah. I watched him for so long. I in fact, at one point, I sent him an email. I'm not going to go into that. But anyways, and then Red Boomer says, Q for MythVisions. Would you debate Minar Reports?
I have no clue who that is.
He's the ultimate crash out.
Oh, bear with me. I'll introduce you right now.
You'll be very happy.
Yeah. I got you.
Oh
you. Bear with me.
Your life is about to get worse.
I think normally we can go directly live to Minar. That's how it works.
Yeah. So I'm going live to Minar right now. Let's see what he's doing.
Oh my god, really?
Oh, he's working out. He's working out.
Oh, the son of a.
Oh, he's
what?
It's not happy.
Wait, this is live or is this an old clip?
Please, you gotta show them.
It's live.
You gotta show the haters you can do it.
Show the haters, Minar.
Come on, Minar.
Please don't stop. Please give me power,
What?
please.
You got the power, Minar. You can do it.
Please.
You got
You
this.
got it, dude.
Come on, Minar.
Pull up.
It's just
Come on,
one pull-up now.
Minar.
What the hell?
You got this, buddy.
No, I'm weak.
Oh.
No, you're not.
You're so strong. Dude.
Don't
say
give up,
that.
Minar. Don't give up.
Pray to Allah.
You got
Minar,
it, buddy.
drink a
I'm so weak.
monster.
I'm so weak.
Pull, Minar. You got this. Use that strength, Minar. You're strong, man.
What?
Come on, Minar.
You got
Come on,
it.
Minar.
Come on.
No jumping, Minar.
Oh, almost.
Maybe
Nice
next
attempt,
time.
Minar. Good try.
Nice
Well,
chest hair.
What the hell was that?
Minar.
Oh my God! You guys.
Yeah,
know
that's Minar. He's a Muslim debater.
Minar.
Okay.
Minar.
Crashing out.
He's not a precept.
He's crashing out.
Yeah,
Jeez.
he's Muslim.
Yeah, well, I have been dabbling in Islam, as you know. I think some of you might know. I've been dealing with I started a series called "The Human Origins of the Quran," and it's all about
fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, because they believe that he got these visions in a cave, the revelations, of course, from Gabriel and stuff. And I started looking closely at like Surah 18, Sleepers in the Cave,
Right.
9. Once you see that those stories are lifted from earlier hagiographies,
And from the infancy gospel.
all of that. Yeah, the clay birds, the
Clay
whole nine.
birds.
Yeah.
Do you think it borrows it all from Arabian Nights?
It might. No, it really might.
The Pegasus for sure.
It could. I mean, I think that Gilgamesh, I know this is going to sound, a lot of people may not realize the significance of Gilgamesh, even down into the Common Era, is still a thing. The Alexander Romance, when you look carefully at that, the entire template of the Alexander Romance is Gilgameshish, except they've Christianized it. And they've changed, the plant of immortality, the old man, young plant that's in Gilgamesh. They've just changed it to a fish, and he has a cook with him, and like there's Christian baptism imagery, if you will. So I did a whole documentary on this recently, and I've had a lot of Muslims like make response videos already to it. But yeah.
Oh, you cut out. Is that me or is it?
Someone was starting to talk and then it cut.
Oh, okay. No.
That might have been Howdy. I don't know.
No. I just got disconnected.
Gotcha. And there is. What was that? Is that your cat, Nitty?
Yeah.
Interesting. And there's one more in back, Phantomaton. Did they do anything yet? They came up yesterday, right? Phantomaton, you get your mic working?
This will be a good time.
Hello? I guess not.
I really like Gilgamesh. If you want to bring sort of scavengers into the city, I'd give them Gilgamesh. I like it.
I love that.
Well,
story.
I mean, look, even today, it's not uncommon to see a story about a urbane, like citified guy who goes out into the country and meets a rough, rustic friend who shows him the way life really works out in the real rural world. And then they have to navigate adventures and they end up in the city, and the rural friend finds all the amazing things about the city, but eventually goes back to the country. Like, that's like a totally old story.
I love it. I think it's one of the best stories I've ever like really enjoyed. There's some repetition, but that was the style then. One of the interesting things I covered recently in my video was just the Enkidu character and Adam, showing some of the overlap there, because I was coming at Wes Huff, who
and the Book of Daniel makes an obvious reference when
what was that battle? I'm sorry.
Who's the king of Babylon who goes out and eats grass?
Yeah.
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
When you finish with this topic, can you elucidate a little bit to us about the Wes Huff battle you had? I want to hear more about. I want to hear about that.
The drama with that whole thing.
Yeah. You guys have so many videos back and forth, and I watched a few of them. But I like what's the lowdown on that?
Well, the lowdown is he's never publicly responded to me or Nil. He won't. He won't gratify us with his attention.
Oh, so he won't even acknowledge y'all.
He doesn't want to. Clearly, he wants to keep his audience from being as much aware of it as possible, but also trying to take the humble path. And his audience rewards him even more for that. They just see him as a hero who's like, oh, we're not engaging these toxic critiques that are being made toward him. Look, Neil can be pretty hot-headed. Let's keep it real. My buddy Neil, right? But Neil, when he thinks he's right about something, and you're making up, whereas I'm much more calm in my responses and the way I approach things. But so here's the chronology. Here's how the whole story went down. Neil gets on Danny Jones. Okay, Danny Jones is big at this point. 1 million subscribers roughly when Neil shows up on his channel. They become buds. He shows up. Wes Huff had 30,000 subscribers or something, which in the grand scheme of like YouTubers is remote. It's pretty small. Okay. It's not that big for where a lot of these platforms are. And
I'm sorry to interrupt, but your mic is cutting out.
Grow their stuff. And so he is clearly on a mission to try and get on Danny Jones' podcast, because at that time he was going to try to engage with Amon Hillman. Around the time that Neil got on Danny Jones, Amon Hillman showed up with his crazy, it's just nuts to me, that Jesus is like trafficking children in the garden scene and all of that. So I don't want to get in and make YouTube hurt you or anything, okay? This is how nutty some of this stuff is. It's so bad I can't even say it. Yeah, and Wes is an apologist and talking to Danny Jones saying, I will debunk this guy. And instead of hitting Amon, Neil goes on and talks about the long ending of Mark. He makes this comment about the cut that scandalous long ending missing from the Gospel of Mark, and how problematic this is, that they ended up inventing or crafting and adding on a fake one, okay? A later forged insertion. And he just says there's no resurrection appearances, which is kind of odd. And he may have not been so clear with Danny, like, okay, there was some kind of resurrection or at least an apotheosis here that does happen, but there's no appearances. There's no resurrection appearances. And what happened was Wes Huff decided he was going to go after Neil. So he does this video on Instagram, like 2.5 minutes, where he's correcting Neil. You don't do that with Neil if you don't want to like really piss. It's almost word for word, right? Wes doesn't even say almost on Joe Rogan's show. He says it's word for word. So it's not almost. Anyway, so we're getting pedantic here, but it's important to point out what happens. Wes makes this video to an unknown crowd of people emailing him for a debate. When Neil did a call out that the video got 150,000 views, saying, I will debate you anytime, any place, right now on the long end. Like, Neil's a headstrong hothead. You know what I mean? So he makes this video and he's like, I've had a lot of requests to debate and I need to spend more time with my family and I'm not doing any debates. Maybe one day I'll decide, you know, like this was secretly talking to Neil. I know it was. There's no one else who made a video around that time that popular, got that much attention. That many Wes Huff fans came and disliked the video and were saying, well, why don't you debate him in the comment section? And we're like, idiots. Are you not watching the video? He's saying he will. Wes won't talk to us. He won't talk to Neil. He won't have an engagement, right? So a week goes by. I'm reaching out to friends of Wes Huff who know him, have his cell phone number, and are directly in contact with Wes. And Stephen is his name, Stephen Boyce, who has a PhD in New Testament stuff. And he, I believe, is an Anglican. He joins me and Neil for a live stream because Wes won't. To set the record straight on where Wes was wrong, but then also what Wes probably meant. On behalf of his friend Wes, he shows up to help about the long ending of Mark. And we were generous. We were critical, but we were generous. And we have respect for people who want to have honest engagements and discussions. And so he came on. And for the record, I had to up front. I said, Stephen, let's clear the air. There are thousands of people were in the chat. They still thought Wes was right. Even when Wes's best bud is saying Wes was wrong. You can't help that. You can't do anything about it. So we had a good long stream. We squashed having any issues. He appears on Joe Rogan. That's when the word for word thing about the great Isaiah scroll and the 1,000-year later Masoretic text tradition are word for word identical. And then Joe goes, word for word.
It turned towards the computer again. Your mic turned towards the computer again.
Yeah. So I don't know why it does that. I'm sorry that's happening tonight.
Oh, I think you're just bumping it.
You're just excited. That's cool.
Yeah, maybe I am punching it. I don't know. What did you miss?
That's
we heard it.
Word for word.
A robot.
Yeah.
Word for word.
Word for word. He says word for word. Joe Rogan says word for word. Really? Wow. And then he's like, yes, word for word. And then I've caught Joe Rogan in future episodes people sent to me. He believes this is a miracle. Joe Rogan today thinks that this word for word thing really happened and that it's a miracle. And I
think that it's a bit of a contradiction in terms to say Joe Rogan thinks.
I'm like, that took a second to hit. Yeah, I think you're right. That's a powerful point. He did that video out, and then crazy part was Alex O'Connor reaches out to me, right? And he's like, hey, dude, you got a second to chat? I'm like, sure, man, of course, absolutely. It was a late night. And he's like, something weird is happening in my chat. There's all these chats that are defending Wes, and it almost feels like bots. And I was like, really? I had the same problem. I had this endless amount of comments come in, like a tidal wave of people to defend Wes, to make us look stupid, like we don't know what we're talking about. He was really like baffled about it, to be honest. He's like, I don't understand what's going on here. This is really odd. I've never experienced this in all my years of doing YouTube. And I said, me neither. And we hung out for a little while, chatted about this, that, and then we ended the call. But he then did reactions to this whole word for word thing. And in the process of reacting, he pointed out, as I did too in a whole different video, it's just Alex gets way more attention, way more views. If you just open up like there's a modern scholarly book that has a translation of all the Dead Sea Scrolls. The critical scholars who translate it tell you, like in the Great Isaiah Scroll, there's problems. Like there's differences between that and the Masoretic. There's differences between that and some of the other Isaiah scrolls that come later in the Qumran community. And there's additional material there that isn't in the Masoretic. There's problems, right? It's not word for word. Yeah. And a lot of these texts, some of the words don't matter. You know, they don't make a difference of theology, and some of them do. And
in some cases, the LXX sides with the DSS over the MT, which is strong evidence that the difference is theologically important and was changed to the MT.
Yes, there's a lot of that later stuff that I think the MT's for sure changing, especially like Deuteronomy 32, the sons of God. You know, he's talking about dividing them into the sons of Israel. They want to get away from the divinities at the council of the God. You know, they want one God. Strong monotheism, it seems, later influences the Masoretic. And all of that blew my mind that, you know, when you actually look at it from a critical standpoint, and it's unfortunate. Big channels aren't interviewing guys like me or Neil. They're just not. Like, get the other side. Why don't you hear that out? But I get it. They got to do their thing.
I don't know why Alex isn't big enough to go on Joe Rogan now. Like, he's bigger than Wes.
Oh, so. He's definitely deserved of it. I think Joe wants, you know, just like me. I'm not interested in like actually having an apologist come on my channel. Hey, go interested in hearing and having them learn your story. Like I have a bias, right? My bias is I want critical scholarship. That includes academics who just so happen to be Christians, but they're not apologists. Like if I ask them, was Jesus wrong about these predictions? They'd say, yeah. Are there contradictions? Yeah. Are there problems in Christianity? Yeah. No, they have faith. It's the personal choice, and I respect their decision. I don't press them.
Okay. But Derek, what about the minimal facts?
You know, you got 5 minimal facts, and even the skeptics will agree. Bart Ehrman says this. All these people will say this, and they all agree with the facts that the disciples believed that there was a resurrection event.
Right.
And real fast,
the
I'm resetting the goal right.
coincidences, they really show the case.
All right, I am resetting the goal right now, but I didn't yell goal in the last one that we hit. We didn't hit this one, but we did hit the last one. So, like, go! All right, and we'll get caught up on that stuff here in a little bit too, but
ground that, Eugene.
So, Derek, do you think that they're holding Wes Huff as some kind of golden cow? That if he doesn't debate, he can't lose a debate, and they've managed to get him on Joe Rogan. You know, inspiring philosophy isn't going to turn up on Joe Rogan anytime soon. So they're quite happy for him to go out into the trenches.
Yeah, I think that Wes made a smart move, not getting Neil doesn't exist, and he still pretends that Neil doesn't exist. I don't know. I think the only reason Wes Huff got the free ride to Joe Rogan over someone like Michael Jones is that Wes Huff went against Billy Carson, who is engaging in the alien Sumerian proto-biblical material and thinks that there's like extraterrestrial engagement and stuff like that. And it's
I'm sure you'll agree. I'm sure you'll agree that
nonsense.
The Billy Carson is kind of like kicking a puppy in the debate scene. It's not difficult to refute what he's saying.
Right. Yeah, especially when it was simple, basic facts about certain materials that everyone would agree on, you know, these texts are later, or this is a forgery, or, you know, not trying to sell one view. I mean, there are hints on some of the things that Billy Carson brought up in that debate with Wes Huff. When you take it carefully, there are ideas that Jesus didn't get crucified that are early on. It's not the mainstream idea, but there are ideas that Jesus himself was not crucified, that someone in his stead was crucified. There's even the hypothesis that Simon of Cyrene, who took the cross, which we get in what is the fun Life of Brian movie, if you haven't seen it,
right?
Where at the end he's like, "Hey, can you hold this cross?" And then he picks it up, and then Jesus runs away. Even though it seems to be in a docetic setting that this narrative takes place under some of the what's his name? Not Docetes, but trying to think of the early Gnostic. They called him a heretic.
Valentinus?
No. Basilides.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. The same named guy shows up in the healing miracle of Vespasian, Alexandria, Egypt. So Basilides probably was a common name, but anyway, Basilides seems to be in that school of thought. In his writings, there's this idea, but you're wrong because you made errors. Then Wes has too. And so that's why I got in the ring simply out of the kindness of my heart, not because I agree with Billy's ideas that I think are pseudo. It was just like, I saw a human, you know what I'm saying? I saw a real human who was really hurt in this. And he really somehow was believing this stuff that he's hearing from Sitchins, and he's really involved in that world and thinks it's true. I've had conversations with him off record. He really believes this stuff. And he's a very nice guy, even though I think he's wrong. And so I was like, okay, well, if I saw any Christian apologist, let's say, who actually experienced that and was hurt on that level, my heart would empathize for them. I don't care who they are. I would just be like, hey, man, look, if I've gone too far, let's stop this now, because you're a human before this online meme. Derek online, MythVision, I am the same guy you see online, believe it or not, in real life. And many of the scholars who meet me know that. But I don't want to hurt people, you know, and if I feel like I have, I'm trying not to. And it sucks because you're going to hurt someone no matter what, if you do anything.
Yeah.
That's what happened behind the scenes. And me, Joshua Bowen, Kip Davis, were talking with Billy Carson about having them come on to give the actual Hebrew Bible and Assyriologist position for Billy Carson fans to understand what real scholarship says about these things. And if they want to interpret things differently or go beyond that, at least they have some education. Billy was going to set it up and fly them down to Florida. I was going to have Josh and Kip stay at my house, which I'm about 3.5 hours away from where Billy lives. And we were going to all go down there, get in the studio and talk and educate the world on this material, just to take the time to say, hey, here's the perfect time to give what real scholarship says on the matter. And yeah, now I'm now a Billy Carson 2.0 according to many Christian apologists online. And it's like,
Jesus,
it's unavoidable.
Whatever, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right, man.
They want to say that they have the scholarship on their side on something because it makes them feel so much better than how they normally feel.
Bye.
It's funny how they love the scholarship if it happens to push a position they prefer, but when the scholarship says that position is crazy, they're just like, "Oh, the scholars are all biased."
Well, Wes Huff, I did a recent live stream about Mesopotamian stuff and Genesis. I literally was going over how Noah's flood is copying earlier Mesopotamian material. And I used the word stolen, but that's because Wes Huff did a video, which I reacted to in the live stream, where he calls it plagiarism, and then he uses the term borrowing, which are two different ideas, and it's anachronistic because there was no plagiarism in that time. But in the video, he plays this game, and it bothers me, man, because I'm like, you know how many people are watching these videos? He quotes a scholar in the video to prove that the Gilgamesh epic is dependent upon the Enuma Elish. This is consensus. Everyone agrees. It's so obvious because in the Gilgamesh tablets, because it's not one tablet, we have a late one, in it, it preserves the name for Utnapishtim, for the earlier flood survivor from the older Enuma Elish, okay? Right. Atrahasis epic.
Atrahasis, yeah.
That's right. It's not Enuma Elish, that's the creation epic, but it's the Atrahasis epic. And it's obvious. Everyone agrees. But the scholar he quotes, this is what gets my whole thing going. If you go and read that scholar's position, he does think that Genesis is dependent upon the Atrahasis. He doesn't think, this scholar he quotes doesn't think it's on Gilgamesh. Okay. He thinks Atrahasis. Wes's entire video is to act like there is no connection, like they're not borrowing from these earlier Mesopotamian myths. And it's like you quoted a scholar that you don't draw that conclusion on. You don't agree with the scholar's conclusion on these things, but you only cherry-picked him to prove that Gilgamesh is dependent upon the Atrahasis epic. What about Genesis' dependence upon the earlier Mesopotamian myths? The whole video was a cope and a way to distance the biblical narrative from that earlier mythology. And I'm like, yo, what's going on here? And he just wants to say, well, there's something unique and different about the Genesis account. Yeah, it does different things, no doubt. Cain is poo-pooed upon, Abel is thumbs up. The nomad, the shepherd nomad is seen as the good guy. When you go towards civilization, that's bad. Whereas in the older Mesopotamian, the civilization, the ziggurat, which is the Tower of Babel, technically, in Genesis 9 through 11, you get the Tower of Babel scene and Nimrod and all of that. That is the ziggurat. That is a Mesopotamian antitext that you can find this trope. And that is the peak. You want to become like the gods. Genesis is trying to do the opposite. It's reacting to this material. And every critical scholar I've ever read says that much, including Joel Baden, who's a Hebrew Bible expert as well. He doesn't think that Genesis is directly borrowing from Enuma Elish, or like maybe he thinks differently about the Noah story with Gilgamesh and Atrahasis. But Genesis 1, he doesn't think is directly borrowing from Enuma Elish, but he thinks it's got either an oral tradition it's borrowing from the Enuma Elish or a in-between text we no longer have today. His point is, without the Enuma Elish, we would not have Genesis chapter 1. And he says that up front. Apologists will just go, well, Joel Baden disagrees with David Carr. Yeah, right. David Carr disagrees. And it's like, bro, they all agree a Mesopotamian tradition background is there for this. They are borrowing something. They just don't agree on it. Like, well, we don't have to listen to any of them since they don't agree on the details. They do it with documentary hypothesis, you name it. You know what I mean?
Well, and
their
think
position
about,
is all about obfuscating facts and using unknown to insert God or whatever they need to insert.
But the Book of Jonah is a late, Catholicizing attempt to bring Judaism to the whole world. But even the Book of Jonah has the beach gourd scene with the vine that grows, and that's a direct pull from the Atrahasis legend as well. The plant that grants immortality.
I have not looked at that one, that specific example.
These stories go deep. And of course, in early Christianity, archaeologically, 2nd and 3rd century Christian iconography is overwhelmingly either Jesus as Hermes Creophorus or Jonah. Jonah was a huge text to the earliest Christians.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the New Testament depicts just as Jonah in the belly of the well.
Yeah.
But then also, if you go to Acts and you read about the Cornelius story, in Acts 9 through 11, in that Cornelius scene where Peter goes and he has a vision and he has the 3 God's telling him to eat the animals. He fights God on this. He literally says, "No, Lord, I've never eaten anything unclean.
Right.
Do not call unclean what I have made clean." That's Jonah. And then he goes on his mission. By the way, he leaves the same port on his journey, which, is also an important detail. He heads to Cornelius, and Cornelius, this non-Israelite who he didn't expect to get the Spirit, gets the Spirit, converts. This story, many scholars have highlighted as an imitation of the Jonah story. What I find interesting, I got a book back here, and I really should have come prepared with any of these detailed books. It might be in my office, in the other office room where I do my studio. Bruce Loudon, he was a classicist and an ancient Near Eastern scholar. So he had like overlapping awareness of all of this stuff. He knew Homer inside out. He thinks that Jonah is actually imitating Homer, where there's this Odysseus. Yeah, Odysseus is journeying on the sea. There's the shipwreck. He's asleep on the boat. Same theme we see at Jonas 1. And then I told Dennis McDonald, because Dennis thinks that the storm at sea scene in Mark with Jesus and the 12 imitates Homer. And I said, what's interesting, Dennis, is even if scholars were critical of that and said, no, Mark's only using Jonah and it's not using Homer for that scene. That scene in Jonah, exactly. I'm like, dude, the scene in Jonah's using the scene. So you're forced to deal with Homer at some point. And I think Jonah's actually a joke. I think the story is meant to be a parody. It's not meant to be taken literal. And I know some Jewish scholars who think that too. They're like, hey, this is meant to be kind of a humorous story. It's not meant to be taken literal.
Yeah, because the boat is talking. Like when the boat screams out in the Hebrew. I heard.
I haven't heard of that.
Tim Mackey of the Bible Project.
Huh.
I was big into him on my way out, and he was talking about Jonah and how it's the only prophet book that's from the third person, but also it had a bunch of stuff like, well, the boat screams out in the storm, and it comes in the Hebrew, but I don't know specifics. It's been a long time, but I'm with you, because Tim Mackey was the one that got me out of fundamentalism and biblical literalism, because I was like, here's a Christian who's talking about Jonah and other stories, and he's saying in such a way that it gives me permission to not take this stuff literally, which is a big deal, coming from literalism. Like, you have to grant yourself permission to take these as stories, akin to mythology, like Homer and the Iliad and stuff. And then after that, it's kind of just a slope downhill to be like, oh, these are narrative story tropes.
Well, and then if you take Gamirkin seriously, then the Aeneida is just a retelling of Agamemnon and Iphigenia. And in fact, in some of the tales of Agamemnon and Iphigenia, the gods supply a deer to sacrifice instead of Iphigenia.
Yeah, there's all sorts of interesting stuff with that. Did you guys, I don't know how much you guys watch of my channel. I just did one with a scholar who's a Polish scholar on Abraham's story, and he is making a case that Abraham's story, specifically the Akedah, which is him sacrificing Isaac, which the last minute God saves him, is directly dependent upon the Iphigenia story, of course.
Yeah.
But that story that we specifically have is in Euripides, and it had to, he believes the direction is one way, that the Bible has to be borrowing from that. He makes the case in the video if you're interested. And that
there's a great case to be made.
Yeah.
There's also a great case that Jephthah is a copy of the Idomeneus story from Crete.
Right. There's some people who make that case. I don't know inside out that one. You know what I mean? I do know that.
Well, Idomeneus is a warrior who promises the gods that he'll sacrifice the first thing that he sees when he gets back from his victory.
Right. And I mean, that does parallel quite well. Yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one might go, okay, well, it was kind of common to have human sacrifice, and that is true too. But I think when I asked the scholar, he said that he thinks that one could be a little bit less confident, whereas this one he thinks is almost like as certain as you can be when you're making these kind of arguments, and that would force that story of Abraham post 400 BC. So
exactly.
Somewhere down into the late Persian, early Hellenistic period is when he would put it, and no later than 100 BC when Jubilees has rewritten Genesis, which has this account in it.
Well, I think it's Niels Peter Lemke who first showed the Idomeneus parallel, and he thinks that it forces judges to have been like part of the Deuteronomistic history, which, like, sure, that's no problem, like 600-700.
Right. Yeah, I love all this stuff. There's also a story, if you go and read Jan M. or I say Jan because it's Jan. It's like
Jan,
Jan.
isn't it?
Jan. Yeah, I always say Jan in my brain. Jan M. Bremer, he makes the argument, and it is about this old Argonauts, the Jason and the Argonauts myth, where Athamos, the king, has a wife that he had 2 children with, Phrixus and Helle, and he has a new wife named Ino, who's this like cloud goddess who's not fond of the kids, and she's jealous. And there's a drought in the land at the time. So she concocts this story where messengers act. She tells them to say that the oracle at Delphi of Apollo told Apollo is telling him to sacrifice his children to get rid of this drought as the king. And so the messenger brings this news to the king, and Athamos is a faithful king. So he's being obedient, takes him onto a mountain, goes to sacrifice Helle and Phrixus, and a golden fleeced ram flies down, literally picks both the kids up on its back and flies off, saving the children. On their way, crossing the sea. So if I had a map, I could show you it's further up north from where this region is. She falls off into the water, which later this is where we get the Hellespont region. So if you're looking at a map, Hellespont is where this kind of myth derives, the idea that Helle fell into the water here. But Phrixus made it to the end, and when he gets to the land, the promised land that they were foretold was going to happen generations earlier, he sacrifices a golden fleeced ram and hangs the golden fleece in a tree. And so some scholars think that myth may have influenced in some way these ideas about a father or somebody sacrificing their children and being saved by the god last minute. And yeah, so Apollo sent,
and that's the fleece that Jason and his disciples have to go get.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Did he have 12 disciples, Jason?
I
don't know. I don't know the number.
No, there were many Argonauts, more than 12.
Okay, more than 12.
Yeah.
Including Hercules.
Very cool.
Hercules is another fun one, man. He has a resurrection. You know what I mean? He dies and he gets killed by well,
you've had Richard C. Miller on, right?
Yep.
And I just think if you've read him, like any apologetics about like a 1st or 2nd century resurrection being something that people would never have believed is just gone. Like it's just gone.
I have you bring up resurrection. I have a big issue with a lot of even the critical scholars, like as if they wouldn't make up that, look, I think there was a Jesus, right? Could be wrong. He may not have existed at all. We were talking about this earlier. But I think there was, and they would say, a lot of critical scholars would say, no one would ever make up an embarrassing account of a Jewish man being crucified in the most gruesome manner and, do that. They would never make that up. And I'm like,
it's in Wisdom of Solomon chapter 2.
What is?
Basically, the plot of Mark is like in the latter half of the Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, the righteous man who's beset on all sides and then destroyed by the evil people around him. But his righteousness then is like salvatory. That's like all already there.
You have it in the Jewish material, like you just described, even with Maccabees, the martyrdom of these. And then if you take it into the Greco-Roman world, I like to always spin it and go, yeah, but you could make the same embarrassing argument for Attis, because the god Attis is, it depends on the myth you're reading, but Attis, he castrates himself because
he becomes a eunuch for the sake of the kingdom of God.
Yeah, he bleeds out in front of a pine tree, and
which real people did in Rome in the first century.
Yeah, and that makes me kind of think like Jesus in Matthew when he talks about the eunuch being like the peak. There's also a scholar who points out when Paul is arguing in Galatians 5, when he's saying to those who are saying you need to circumcise, he's speaking to people in Galatia. In Galatia, the Attis cult.
The whole way.
Yeah. There are scholars who think that the geography of Galatia, which is where a huge Attis cult was at, their central theme was castration. And Paul says, well, they should just cut the whole thing off, is a jab at the Attis cult. But why would you make that's made up? We know that Attis's castration myth was embarrassing and yet the central myth of the mystery cult that they participated in. So I don't get that you wouldn't make up or couldn't construct a suffering servant motif for your meme, so to speak, for your particular cult. It's not an argument that I find convincing personally. Anyway, I figure I was.
Well, have you read Whedon's Mark, Traditions in Conflict at all?
Not yet. That's the one that talks about the Josephus
stuff. It's a
stuff,
great
right?
book, and he does mention that, but he also mentions this idea that there was a Greco-Roman type of a holy man, and that Greco-Roman holy type is what Mark's just trying to check all the boxes on all the way through, and he's trying to decenter Peter, and he makes fun of him and treats him like a buffoon, and has Peter deny Jesus 3 times and never seen again. So he's like anti-Peter, pro-Paul, and he's just documenting that this Jesus figure met all the criteria for being a holy man. And he shows that like Apollonius and Asclepius and all these other people had all these same little characteristics that you needed to check off. But then he says, but Mark does something different with it, where he has them die and just be translated without any big like flim-flam, all falderall about it. Right. Whereas the other gospel writers are upset about that, and they have to try to repair what Mark gets wrong. It's probably what MacDonald is talking about in his letters back and forth between the evangelists.
Yeah, for sure. Patching in that long ending. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Now that Toronto Bible Study is here, I'm going to run away scared. So it's been a pleasure, fellas.
You can't handle the TBS BS.
You guys have a good night.
Good to see you, BS.
Always. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks, Eric.
Yes, sir.
Well, I came because I heard you were talking about Wes Huff.
Oh, yeah.
Because, for example, I was going to ask you about the Peter thing. You were saying that Peter left from a port, the same port as Jonah. But what port did he leave, like in Acts 10?
Let me pull up Acts 9 and 10 here. And then
Jonah leaves from Tarshish, doesn't he?
Yeah, let me make sure that I may be conflating the we passage section of Acts 16 with the same port that happens to be in Homer. Caesarea named Cornelius.
But Jonah, the author of Jonah, probably gets Tarshish from Isaiah.
Joppa. So the port of Joppa. Oh. So so he told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. So where he's going, the destination was to Cornelius called 2 of his servants, and he's sending his soldiers to go to Joppa. That's where Jonah's at in the Old Testament. So let me pull up Jonah Joppa.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Jonah sets off from Tarshish and goes to Joppa. That's correct.
Right. Yeah, so the location though that Peter's at is the same location that Jonah's narrative is taking place in terms of that. And scholars, by the way, this is
really? Are you sure about that? The same location
Jaffa.
or the same name?
Well, it's the same name, and it's the same
name,
port,
but the same location.
Well, it's the same.
Yeah, it's a big city.
Jaffa. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a bit hasty, you know.
In Acts 10. By the way,
if you see a town that's called Houston, you can't just assume that another town called Houston is the same town, especially if it's a really big town in Texas.
Yeah, so I'm just looking up Acts 10. It says Joppa, modern day Jaffa, Yaffo, is the vital Mediterranean port city where Apostle Peter stayed with Simon the tanner.
And BS, have a wonderful evening. Sorry for the delay on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to see where those.
You might be right. But okay, so he left from Joppa, and then Jonah left from Joppa. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, all the scholars are saying that I've been reading on this is that Acts 10
Joppa's a big city in Maccabees too. There's a lot of mentions of Joppa in Maccabees.
Yeah. Joppa, Jonah and Peter.
Which, by the way, you have to remember that Maccabees was likely considered scripture by the authors of the New Testament. Because I don't know, you're familiar with the Heliodorus story in Maccabees being used as a template for Saul's conversion, right?
Heliodorus, say that again?
So Heliodorus is the Greek guy who goes to try to destroy the temple in Maccabees, but then God strikes him blind and he can't finish his job. And then one of the priests talks to him and explains to him the truth of the Hebrew religion, and he converts, and then his sight is restored. I didn't know that sounds very familiar to a story you've also heard before. So
yeah, I wasn't aware.
I think it was Bob Price who had that in one of his books. I think it might have been either Deconstructing Jesus or Jesus is Dead or something.
He has so many interesting ideas that I think a lot of people sleep on. They don't realize. Yeah, off the top here, I would just recommend looking up, if you're going to Google something, Toronto Bible Study, just look up parallels between Acts 9-10, if you will, the Cornelius story, and Jonah. And I actually found this from a Christian academic who was saying, hey, it looks like because Jonah was such a significant theme of being swallowed and resurrecting, if you will, for a trope that you find with Jesus, the story here in Acts going to the Gentiles, to the people who aren't Jews, fits quite well with Jonah's motif of going to the Ninevites to preach repentance, even reluctantly. And that's why you would have Peter do it, because Peter was reluctant. And you realize how reluctant they were because the chapter 12 or 11 in Acts, the Jews don't believe Cornelius got the Holy Spirit till Peter has to explain to them, like, hold on, yes, I know what you're thinking, but no, this really happened. And it just kind of shows you the different outcomes, of course, because Jonah was pissed off at the end and wanted to die, whereas Peter goes along with the program here in Acts. But
right, but that kind of reversal, like here's the thing. This is what I'm thinking about today. When you watch The Boys, you know that Homelander is a play on Superman. You know he's not Superman, but he's got very similar power set, very similar abilities, very similar style, right? Mm-hmm. Yet you're not going to find a lot of people who are writing long articles about how obvious it is that Homelander is Superman. Because it's so obvious, no one would waste time writing about it. And that's what I think, like Dennis R. MacDonald's like Acts Homer parallels and Acts Aeneid parallels and these Jonah parallels are. They were so obvious to the ancients that no one even bothered to say it except as an aside, like Justin Martyr does when he says, oh, well, our stories are just, they're like your stories, right? Right. So nobody would bother to do a detailed explanation of it back then because literally anybody reading the book would get the reference. Just like when people watch The Boys, they don't need to have like somebody explain, well, this guy's like Superman and this guy's like Aquaman. Right. They already know.
Right. I think that they knew that, especially with scripture. I mean, which I think you and I would agree that there's going to be Homeric or Virgil, Aeneid, things like that they're competing with. But even if you can't get them to go that far and you're just like, hey, let's just deal with Bible, they know the stories of old. They know they've heard the stories of Jonah and Joseph and Moses and Joshua and Elijah and Elisha. And so you would see why it was obvious they were imitating these things in literary form. You know what I mean?
So you're saying any event that has these echoes from the OT is therefore invented or something? Or are you saying that Peter's story is invented there? Or?
Doesn't need to have been wholly invented to be literary, right? Richard Nixon is not a wholly invented character, but his storyline in The Watchmen is not the storyline of Richard Nixon, even though he's a real person.
Yeah, so
right. But is the story of Peter going to visit Cornelius invented, or is it just?
I think it is, but I have other reasons for why, in the grand scheme of how Acts plays out, and why I think this literary piece is more of a. I think it's a fictional history.
It's an attempt to repair the Galatians dispute in a way that allows for there to be a similar gospel to the circumcised and the uncircumcised, where it's Catholicizing anti-Marcionite push.
And to give you reasons why, Toronto, just so you have a better grasp, I'm not just like pulling some fluff out here and just saying it. I think it's important to give you a little bit more background on what Kurt just said. Is a lot of the academics that or critical scholars on New Testament will recognize that Acts is, like he said, trying to patch together a problem that seems to have happened in the early church between Peter and Paul's sect, the movement of Peter and James that he has in Galatians, and Paul. And the way they do that is Paul's to the Gentiles. He's not to the Jews. He's to the Gentiles, to the nations. Peter is to the Jews. His specific mission is to stick with the Jerusalem church. Why is it that Peter shows up as the first person doing Gentile missionary work in Acts, if it isn't to try and squash something that was going on in the early church, according to these scholars, between these two movements, and have Paul be tamed? So if you read Galatians 5, we were talking about earlier, cutting off your balls, the whole nine, in terms of castration, and he's jabbing at anyone trying to make someone circumcised. Go read Acts 21. You'll find real quick at the council, when he goes to meet up with James, they make Titus get circumcised, and Paul's like, yeah, guys, circumcise him. Whereas in Galatians, he literally makes this, I believe it's Titus or Barnabas. One of the, I think maybe Timothy, it's Barnabas. Is it Timothy?
Yeah.
Okay, Timothy.
So, yeah. Okay.
But the fact that he would be on board with circumcising him when he just got done berating the idea on a whole nother level in his actual letters of circumcising anyone, that if you do that, you're literally like making the cross null and void. It's odd to see him constantly comply over here, whereas in his letters, he's not. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know. I think you're just kind of ignoring some complexities of Paul's letters, right? Like he does like mitigate hard against trying to make somebody get circumcised. Like he talks about Titus in the Galatians, right? Not getting circumcised, but
he says that if you're circumcised, it's as if Christ never needed to come to earth.
Yeah, that's different though. But he also talks about how like he to the Jews he became as a Jew, to the Greeks he became as a Greek. Like he's all things to all men. And even in Acts 21 there, what you're talking about there, he goes to the temple, he does an offering, you know, he lives according to the law, quote unquote, in order to placate the Jews who were accusing him of being anti-Moses, right? So I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like those kind of narratives.
But that accusation is what scholars notice, and they say, hold on, why are they making those accusations in Acts to try and get Paul like, no, I'm not saying they shouldn't follow the law and these kinds of things. It's because the scholars say that his letters are indicating that he was implying, he's saying, do not do the works of the law. The works of the law are over. And
but this is the thing. He'll say, don't do the works of the law for salvation. But then in the next line, he'll say, have we abolished the law? No, we established the law. You know,
you're right.
The law of Christ.
TBS, you're right. I agree with you. I think Paul is antinomial, but he thinks you should confer with like the general principles of the law because it's right for you if you're Jewish, right? But that's why the book of Philemon is in the New Testament. It's because I think on the Pauline understanding, Philemon is like this metaphor for the people who've like left Judaism and become Christians. They've now become the begotten sons of the good God, right? The God the Father. And Paul even says that Onesimus is his begotten son, that he's begotten in his chains. But then he sends him back to his old owner and says, I'll pay for whatever the damages were. Because you still need to be like kind to him, but you have to be kind to him because you're being kind to me. And the old owner, Philemon, is the demiurge. He's the God who was the God of justice. And Paul is sending Onesimus back to that world because you still need to live within the world. It's like the Buddhists who say you still have to live in samsara. There's no other purpose for that story, Philemon, to me, to be in the New Testament if it's not an allegory for the salvation that Paul's like talking about. Why would Marcion include that in the Apostolicon if it's just a story about a runaway slave?
Well, it has lots of benefits in the sense that it teaches us about what Paul really thought about slavery and stuff, and what Paul
yeah, like about, slavery is totally chill and you should be a good slave. No, I don't think that makes sense. I think in the rest of the Pauline literature, there's like some problematization of slavery. And again, like Paul's definitely not like an abolitionist or a proto-abolitionist. But remember, Philemon is the name of a new comedian. Philemon is the name of an author of new comedy in like 5th century Athens. And Menander was another author of new comedy who Paul quotes word for word when he says one bad apple spoils the bunch or something like that.
Bad apple. That's not in Paul, man. But anyway, like
well,
I feel
it's something like that. It means that one sinner can
if you look hard enough. Look, all I'm just saying is if you look hard enough in a book like the Bible, you can find parallels with
and Menander wrote plays about slaves being returned to their masters. And in one of his plays, one of the slaves is named Onesimus. I mean, it's correct that you could say, those are all just extra parallels. But if I write a book today that's called All's Well That Begins Well, and one of the main characters is a guy named Will Shake, and another one of the characters is named Puck, and another one is named Oberon, I don't think it's that hard to figure out what I'm doing there. Is it?
I don't know, man, but I don't think that's necessarily proof that there's some kind of borrowing.
There's no proof. This is literary analysis. You're not going to get proof. You're not going to find some old diary in a jar somewhere where Paul says, and what I was trying to do with this.
What are you saying?
You don't get that today.
Wait, what are you saying then? That story's made up too? That whole letter is just made
all
up?
Of the Bible is made up, TBS.
Oh, the whole Bible's made up.
Even if some of it happened.
Utterly ridiculous.
All of it is made up.
Ridiculous, dude. It's like such a reach.
No, that's how people
you're going from this name coincidentally appeared in both of these stories to the whole Bible's made up. Or all these other
No. I don't think you're understanding. I'm using like 20th century French literary criticism techniques here on you. And maybe you're not quite there to get it. But when someone writes a narrative,
I guess I'm not smart enough, dude. Like,
so I'm trying to help you. When someone writes a narrative, there are things about the narrative. You're going to overtalk me, or you're going to learn something here?
No.
When someone writes a narrative, listen to what I'm saying to you because you won't stop talking. You can't hear it.
All you've been doing
because this is going to destroy your position. So I'm just going to have to talk you because you won't stop. When someone writes a narrative, they have a choice of what to put in and what to leave out. They can never write every single thing that happened. And to the degree that they are always making choices about what to put in and what to leave out, even when the story they're telling is correct or true to a degree, it is still a constructed narrative told for a purpose, even when it's attempting to be a true history.
I don't know, bro. Like, listen, the fact that there's one name linking up in some stories have some parallels, doesn't prove that they're borrowing anything. The fact that this story is there in the Bible, it's like a letter, like that he just wrote to this person, you know?
Right. So what's the Zitzim
Leben? Unlikely
that's what you have to know. Do you know what a Zitzim Leben is?
Yeah, Zitzenleben. Yes, the
Okay, so the Zitzenleben of why it's being maintained in the New Testament is that it's doing something that people wanted to have in the New Testament.
And I just want to give you guys a heads up. We're getting pretty close to the time frame, or actually, we went a little bit over, but with Derek. So I think you got about 5 minutes. If anybody else has any questions, is that all right, Derek?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll shut up, Derek.
I just looked at the time there. Sorry about that.
I want to come back too. I got to keep my marriage.
No, I get it. I don't mean to keep you up. We were just having a good conversation there, and I don't really pay attention to the time. But if anybody has any questions, hopefully you got about 5 more minutes, and then we'll get you to bed so your wife doesn't beat you up.
Yeah.
Just a quick one,
TBS probably. So
just a quick one, Derek. I'm just going to drop off now, but thank you very much for coming up. It's been great to have you on the show and for you to elucidate all your knowledge. It's been great. Yeah,
thanks. I want to do this again, and of course, I'd love to come back and hang out with you guys. And always learning, always doing. The stuff that I like. You know what I mean? Maybe I'll take interest in doing some of the stuff you guys do as well at some point. But thank you.
Yeah, I'm about ready to turn into a pumpkin soon too. But TBS, did you have a response?
Well, I would just like to ask what text you're talking about.
Take it easy, UG. Have a good one.
What do you mean?
What text? What text by? You're saying a text by who? An Anaximander? Who is it?
You mean Menander?
Okay. So what text is it? What text is that you're talking about? What book is it?
Give me a second and I'll look it up. I don't have it right in the top of my head.
Well, Onesimus is a common name for slaves back then.
Yeah, that's correct. But it was also a name in a play by this character.
And what other parallels are there between these two stories that I should think that is plagiarized? Like, I don't understand. So it's a common name that people had back then for slaves that appears in this Greek story about a slave and in Paul's letter. What other parallels are there?
I've already just explained that to you. You can review.
Derek, because he's low on time before you guys, solve that
Yeah, go ahead,
discussion.
please.
So I was going to ask Derek because, you're saying, there's this, literary tradition. One way I like to think of books is like this long conversation, and it's good to have, what came before, so you see like what people are sort of responding to. My question for you was, because I think there's a lot going on, like there's the myths, but I think there's also the philosophy angle to it as well. I wanted to ask, have you read like Aristotle and Plato, and do you think they play a role? Or even like, I guess, like Stoics or like Seneca or people like this?
So I've read little of Plato and Aristotle, very little, not much. Of course, Timaeus and Critias I've read, but I haven't read like much of their material. Socrates is another person I've looked into, especially with this trial, as it relates to looking at like New Testament imitations, where a lot of scholars think Luke might be imitating Socrates' trial for Jesus. The way that they portray him is fearless. He has no pain. He's not suffering the same way he does in Mark, where he's showing a lot of anxiety and my God, why have you forsaken me kind of presentation. But the philosophy side is something that I need to dig into more, as I've been reading Robin Faith Walsh, who talks about the Christian concept, and specifically Paul's theology is embedded with Middle Platonism. And so understanding the Stoics more will be helpful for me. And of course, Platonism as well will be very helpful for me to wrap my mind around what's going on with the pneuma, how to understand the spirit in their mindset, all of that stuff. So there is the philosophy angle. And I guess the one thing that comes to mind too, Howdy, is for a while there, they had the Jesus Seminar, and it was led by John Dominic Crossan and others. They believed that Jesus was actually like a cynic. They saw so many parallels between his parables and the cynics that they thought maybe Jesus was just like a radical, cynical philosopher rather than an apocalyptic preacher. And then they kind of dropped that off. They don't hold to that as much any longer, even though John Dominic Crossan kind of does. So there's a lot more on the philosophy side I need to learn and want to learn as I'm diving deep into this material. You might even take the mystery language as well. Plato uses the mystery language in philosophy, but I don't think that encompasses everything that's going on in the early Christian movement. I think they really are a mystery religion. I think this is a mystery cult. And it's not just
Paul
using
says it's a mystery,
right? But a lot of these scholars like Jan and Bremer try to argue in their book that like, oh well, the philosophers use mystery language as well, but they're not like a mystery cult that's doing what the mystery cults were doing. I think that Paul and the early Christians, and they have the sacrament, they're deeply embedded into what I think would be considered a mystery cult. That is something that I think is important to look at. But I did a long video on that, on baptism, and that one flopped. And I'm shocked because it was really well done. But Howdy, I don't know if I addressed your question thoroughly or well enough to just point out I need a lot more learning to do when it comes to the philosophy side of things. But some scholars have encouraged me and given me books to read on that.
Yeah, I think not
real
even
fast. So Howdy and Kurt are both people I talked to. You and I had a little bit of a conversation about some of the philosophy stuff, and I did talk to them. I'd like to make a group, invite you to the group chat with them, if that's all right, and then they can point you towards some books and that type of thing, and that might help a little bit too, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I don't think you have to go like super heavy into philosophy or anything. I just think like it, even as from your perspective, I think it's going to play some sort of role in like the, I guess, literary history of things, like, and the Hellenic mindset. I mean, I don't see how you could talk about post-Platonic literature without talking about Plato. Like, to me, at least, he's sort of, his influence is like immense.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
But I mean, to Howdy's point, the antique Christians were so concerned about the influence of Stoicism on Christianity that they forged a correspondence between Paul and Seneca to make it look like they were communicating back and forth because their ideas were seen as so similar.
And we are a little bit over 5 minutes. Are there any other questions, or everybody good here?
No, I'm turned into a pumpkin a half hour ago. I need to go.
I will say, I hope we get to talk again later. You should pull up another time.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, Derek.
Yeah, I really appreciate you hanging out, man. This has been fun.
Look,
You're so knowledgeable.
I appreciate it. No, yeah. And Howdy, you're right. There's a lot to the philosophy side that needs to be addressed, because right out the gate, the apologists are doing that. Justin Martyr, I mean, his whole thing is capitalizing on this, where he literally makes, I want to say, justifications, I'll put in scare quotes, to argue why Plato was given divine revelation, that God, he already was kind of a proto-Christian before Jesus.
Exactly.
And so all of this is needed.
Augustine says that too. A lot of people say that Augustine baptized but also like, because you had mentioned Philo, and you said you've already read the Timaeus. I'm sure you've drawn some parallels between those, as everyone else has. Yeah. So like, a lot of people think Philo did a lot of influence on the New Testament as well. There's just a lot of, I think there's a lot going on, and then this, because a lot of people just do like, oh, well, there's myths on myths on myths on myths, but there's like other things going on that I think that are part of the story to tell, I think. Maybe I'm phrasing it wrong because it's late and I don't know how to use my words good.
Yeah, I mean, not everything's a myth. There are various categories and genres of literature. And a lot of times the myth may have philosophy, not may have, but has a philosophy behind it. I don't think it's one or the other, right? We're not just reading a philosophy text. There's going to be philosophy embedded in the story, and the story itself is a well-crafted myth or a well-crafted legend. There's various genres that you can approach this. So one might call them fables, right? It just depends on the category and how technical you want to get. When I talk to a popular audience, they don't really think too much of a difference between the word legend or myth or even fable. So there's become kind of synonymous to most people in the world. But when you talk to like a folklorist or a mythologist, they'll be like, oh no, don't use that term, use this term because this means, and it's like, oh, okay. Let me be careful with my specific genre categories for this stuff. But yeah, we're on a journey, and I want to come back to I really enjoy this panel, hanging out with you guys and enjoying Taco's invitation. I do have children, unlike Neil. Neil doesn't have kids yet, so Neil gets to hang out to you till the sun rises, and it's not as easy for me to find these hours into my schedule, especially when I wake up early, hit the gym, work I rise with the sun and I set with the sun typically,
And Gretchen says, Derek, if you take anything from this, please remember, never go full Fildo. Okay, thanks. Bye. Thanks.
I've definitely
greatly appreciated.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Kurt, thank you too. Again, Taco, Toronto, really nice to meet you. And again, thanks for the comment about Wes. And I get it why we wouldn't see eye to eye. I mean, if you're a believer, I get it. And yeah, it's interesting you went to school with him.
Yeah, I appreciate you going into that because, I remember him doing a video, and then he pulled a video. Did he respond to you at one point and then remove a video?
Me?
Yeah,
I'd never seen him respond to me.
I
think
never
he
mind. I thought he
avoided
pulled a video at some point. I might be wrong.
Full of it. I'm like, okay, that is life, right?
I'm with you. Well, once again, I really appreciate you hanging out with us. It was a pleasure chatting with you. We learned a lot tonight from you. And everybody, make sure to subscribe to MythVision podcast on YouTube. I believe that's how it's listed. It's Derek with MythVision, Derek Lambert. If you YouTube him, it'll pull him up under MythVision. And he has another YouTube. What was the name of the other YouTube that you run now?
Oh, I got a couple: MythVision podcast, MythVision TV, which is just my second channel, and then I have a MythVision Reacts channel where I'll just play a video sometimes and be reacting to it and giving my own 2 cents along the way, where I really don't keep the
buff anytime.
Yes, but make sure to subscribe to all of his stuff because he has amazing content. He's got awesome documentaries and all sorts of mythologies, literally everything you could think of, and he has every scholar. Literally I'm probably overstating, but most scholars in the industry on his channel, and has interviews with them, or they're covering a topic, educating people on a topic. Ton of great stuff. And then he's also got MVP. What is the website? MVP
dash courses.
MVP dash courses, where most of those, or a lot of those scholars actually have courses. So make sure you go check those out. He's got a bunch of great stuff on there. I've done quick look throughs, and I haven't taken a course, but he's got a ton of great looking courses just from an initial run through it and looking at that when I did that.
Yeah, MVP-courses.com. My wife runs that business, that side of things. And it's just a bunch of different scholars who a lot of them have retired, and some of them haven't. And we recorded in 4K, high quality, lecture series, 8 to 10 lectures on something that they specialize on, that they're PhDs in the field on and have a lot of skill with. And they pretty much made it to where you take the course at your own pace. So you own it for life. You can take it at your own pace and go through what their lectures are saying. Some of them have course pamphlets. Some of them do Zoom calls with students. So after one course, they do 6 Zoom calls monthly where they meet with the students. And it's really cool to see people take their education further and at their own pace. You know what I mean? It's been really cool to help people get more enlightened and learn. And there are people from all backgrounds. So it's not like you must be an atheist to come watch this stuff. Everyone under the sun is taking courses from these scholars, because these are academics from, you name it, Yale, Princeton, Miami University, Harvard, just all over the place.
But if a space alien wanted to take the class and they were not under the sun, they could still take it, right?
They could still take it as long as they had $39.95.
As long as they paid them.
You might want to move your mic forward just a little bit again.
Okay.
It was just cutting you out again.
I wonder if
I gotta go, guys.
thing.
But if you all got anything out of him today and you want to learn more, that is a great place to do it. tons of great courses on there. I've looked at the scholars. He's got Josh Bowen, Dr. Carrier, tons of great people. I think he had one with Kip Davis too, right?
Yep.
Yeah, lots of great ones on there. So definitely check that out. And once again, we all appreciate you being here. I speak for everybody, I'm sure. Everybody was super pumped earlier when I was talking about it. So thank you so much for being here. You're awesome. You've got lots of fans here. It's a pleasure having you, man.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and I'll be back.
Cool. Have a good one. Take it easy, man.
All right. Peace. Have a good one.
Peace.